Hello everybody, and welcome to a stream that I'm so excited to present. It is every gap in every Marvel Epic collection from their classic epic line, not just the gaps, the maps, the what are they, the when do they turn modern, everything you've ever wanted to know about the Marvel Epic collection line but had nobody to ask because I know the answers. You don't have to adjust your screens unless they need adjusting because the angle is bad, because it is Krisis. You are having a crisis. I'm coming to you live from New Zealand on a wintry morn, and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite collection formats. You can see them surrounding me. Honestly, it is really on all sides. They're just behind some of these other books, but they continue here. And that is the Marvel Epic Collection. So I'm going to explain what it is. I'm going to explain why I'm so obsessed with it. And then we are going to go through all of the classic epic lines, line by line. I'm going to explain exactly what the status of the lines are right now. And if you don't know what classic means or lines means, you will know in a moment. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Because it's not just the great hair, it's because I have every classic epic collection that Marvel has ever released. And also I have this website that you may or may not have seen before called Krisis, it's spelled with a K, .com, where it has maps of so many Marvel characters and titles, including, I think what I discovered during this, of the Marvel Universe titles, all but 3 of the titles that have epic collections. And so I'll talk a little bit more about Krisis and how you can use that. But I want you to walk away from this knowing exactly where we stand with epic collections right now as I speak at the very end of June in 2026. Happy Pride, y'all. And the thing about this that's interesting is that Marvel announces epic collections a few times a year, and they're usually announced on near mint condition by my friends Omar and Curtis. And so every time now that there's another announcement, you can come back here and I'll have an updated version of this. So this one is updated as of the announcements they made just a couple of weeks ago, which had titles taking us all the way through March of 2027. And I really thought that the epic lines had a lot more gaps than they did, but I'm going to explain all of that, because not only are you going to learn, I learned a ton putting this together. It was basically a full work week to do all of the research and put it all together, and I'm so excited to have it so tidy for you. Okay, so I guess let me just say hello to a few people who are live in the chat. I think my friend Logan Wayne was the first one to chat, although his first chat got swallowed, and he wants me to talk about the classics versus the moderns. And that's definitely something I will be addressing on an ongoing basis. Kia ora to my Wellington sibling Wiccan Solar. Jamie C is here, not even an epic fan, but an epic fan of listening to me talk. Andrew Lingard also owns 0 epics, but thinks this might be fun. Raptor Andrew, who I haven't seen for a while, was here asking some early questions, although I think they may be busy during this actual stream time. Bonsoir to Cedric and Ellen, looking forward to this one. Hello to Super Jop and Super Panda, back-to-back supers. The Invincible Igor's here live, as is Mall360. DC Finest Tracker is not something that I maintain. I hope that's one of the people from the DC Finest Tracker, and if not, who are you, imposter? But no, I'm very happy to have you here, and I want to know what exactly about the DC Finest are you tracking? This show is actually very much inspired by us doing our DC Finest poll, and DC Finest are so interesting. They're over on this side of me, because they're kind of very similar to epic collections with a few key differences, and it made me think, wow, it's been a while since I've really looked so closely to the epic collections as close as we had looked at the DC Finest. Suspicious Sludovich is here, recovering, I think, from a little bit of a troublesome weekend. I'm really happy to see them. One Wheel Tracks is not here, but still said hello, because they're working for videos on their own channel. If you have not seen One Wheelchair's channel recently, he has been going back and recapping the episodes of X-Men 97 Season 1 in anticipation of X-Men 97 Season 2. So that is really fun. I'm going to say hello to a few other people. Edwin Billiot, Shockmaster General has 131 epics. Def Kiss 1983 saying greetings to all. And I think I said hello to most. Oh, Richard B42, there's always something. I was going through a journey with the hair and makeup team today. Let me tell you, Yarne Pauls is here. See you next Tuesday, part of the Trash Can fam. Everybody loves to see you next Tuesday. Cruel Angel is here, one of our very regulars. James Abel, the Cerebro of the comic book loving internet. Puddin' Tame is here as well. Saz Murph, and kia ora to another one of my New Zealand siblings. Oh my gosh, Samantha. Connor, 52786. Have we said hello to Connor before? I'm usually pretty good with names. Goody is here. D. Marcella's here early. And Richard Fearing. Let me tell you something, by the way, to those of you who are here early. There's an after show. If you haven't watched this live, you wouldn't know that. But there's usually an after show, usually. There always is now. And I answer all the kind of off-topic questions. So if people are asking things in the chat about my deep opinions about chunky versus smooth peanut butter or anything comic related that's not on target, we will talk about that after in the chat. And if you're watching live, the link to the chat is in the description below. Nick N is about to start from the beginning of Thor Modern Epic #1. Lance the Library is here, and I think at this point we got to get started. Hello to William Lee. Hello. I think a new hello to a new name, at least one I don't recognize recently. R Spain 03 saying woo! And the Artunism here. Reaper. Oh my goodness, this is a new shirt, by the way. So thank you very much for the compliment. Flattery, as we know on this channel, will get you everywhere. As Adrian Montana says, nice to be here. Looking forward to the data. And Zesty Retro and Games says, can't wait and loves talking to me. And oh my gosh, there's so many hellos. I know how to say this. He taught me. Phase. Oh, you're going to have to teach me again. I'm so bad at I can barely pronounce my last name. Sometimes when people get it right, I'm like, that is the right way to say it. Jay Passan is here as well. Jade Rabbit, who asks the best questions. Papa John's variant. Doom Vader DJ, and so many others. But I think Brian Man 74 is the last individual I need to say hello to. Okay, let's just set the stage. Thank you for your patience as I say hello to all those people, because you know what? This stream doesn't happen without live viewers, and there's a reason that I do it live rather than pre-record, because I present all of this data, in this case, dozens of hours of data and information, relying on hundreds of hours put into Crushing Krisis to bring this all together. But if I just present it in a vacuum, if there's questions, if there's things I get wrong, if there's things to explain that don't occur to me, I don't get to do that. So this only really works when we're live, and that only works because I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Krisis. Now, it has not been updated for a while, and I feel very sad because people are like, have recently left a handful, a small portion, which is totally fair. The world is rough right now. And they're like, well, Krisis hasn't been updated as much as I thought they would. But the thing is, each of the after shows is a Patreon benefit. All of the guides that are maintained and updated constantly on Crushing Krisis, including some huge updates to some of the Batman guides I've made recently and to all the guides you'll be seeing today, are part of the benefits of Crushing Krisis. So it's not about constant razzle dazzle. It's about the accumulated wealth of knowledge. So let's talk about what are epic collections, right? Picture it, Sicily. Picture it. It's 2013, and we're in a world where wishing for a Marvel collection of your favorite issues from Marvel, it may or may not happen. There's not that many omnibuses back in 2013. There's no real standard paperback format. X-Men's coming out in chunks that sort of line up. There's these old things called Premier Classic hardcovers that are like a hardcover that has like a well-known run in it, but sometimes they'll release 3 or 4 in a row, but they're not comprehensive and they're pretty short. They're like 200 and something pages. The idea that we would ever have like a whole run of anything, really, even X-Men, which they were doing a pretty good job with, felt totally imaginary up until the trade paperback era, which really kicks off in 2004. And when we say trade paperback era, we mean an era partially ushered in by David Gabriel of where every new series was getting put into trade as it was released. So there was kind of nothing left behind. That wasn't perfect right in 2004, but between 2004 and 2006, it really happened. And after 2006, there's very few Marvel series that didn't get an initial trade paperback, right? So here we are looking back and saying, well, how do we get the stuff from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s? We had Marvel Masterworks, which are up here, collecting stuff from the 60s forward, but they were completely sequential, and they never came out at a speed of more than 1 per year per line. So that's the stage I want to set for you. The idea of kind of getting random issues of some title you really, really loved seemed impossible, especially if they were not well liked. Like, it was one thing to get a big run in an omnibus that was like a big starring run of a character that everybody loves, but to get those in-between issues that were out of the Masterworks range and between omnibuses, it just felt like it was never going to happen. And that's kind of where the birth of Crushing Krisis came from. If you've never seen Crushing Krisis, so here is the home, let me just zoom out a little bit here, the home of the Marvel guides. And this just goes to show you just how many guides there are on the Marvel side. The ones with the Marvel logo are ones that I'm teasing soon to come. The ones with the red of them are Patreon. So here's all the teams that I cover. And of course, X-Men has its own like list of X-Men guides and X-Men solo heroes. So does Avengers. But then here's all of the characters I cover. And the reason this was necessary was, like I was saying, like, you didn't know for, let's just pick like Iron Man, because we're about to talk about him in a second. You didn't know for Iron Man when Iron Man, all of his stuff was going to get covered. I mean, look at all of this Iron Man that exists. And even if we're talking about stuff before the trade era, we're still talking about all of this, which is like 400 plus issues of Iron Man. There was no concept of when will that be covered. So Marvel announced that it would be released in September of 2013. This is the first Epic collection. It's never been reprinted, this particular one. So this truly is a copy of the first one ever. And this is Iron Man, the Enemy Within. And this is non-famous Iron Man issues. It's issues 158 through 177 and Annual 5. And this is the run that comes, if I'm not mistaken, I guess this is something I ought to know. It's the run that comes right after the Michelini, Layton, and Romita Jr. omnibus. Yes, I am correct. Luckily, my guide tells me these things. And so this is not as famous as that run. And so the idea was like, it's written by Denny O'Neil, also beloved, but not on the level of that Layton Michelini run. And so the idea was like, would there be any way to get this? And look how thick it is. This was pretty long for a Marvel trade paperback at the time. It's 502 pages. And it has all the issues in perfect order. And not only that, so no omissions, which sometimes would happen on the omnibus line. And although this one doesn't have anything extra, as we learned as the initial other Epic collections rolled out, they were not going to skip anything. Like if there was an inventory story or an anthology story or a really important guest appearance, they would be in here in the right publication order, sometimes tweaked to be in the right reading order. So of course, everybody was excited. And Marvel initially announced all the kind of big Silver Age heroes, Captain America, Thor, Iron Man. But there was this question of like, well, there's 400 issues of a lot of these heroes. These books cover about 20 issues each. How long is it going to be to get 20 books? But they set a pace of doing 2 per year originally for a lot of these big lines. And the thing was, they weren't sequential. So in the same way this came right in the middle of a run, there was another book that was like the first volume. And then there was a random other volume. And so it was kind of like puzzled together. And a lot of the fun of being an Epic Collection fan has kind of been putting together the gaps and the maps. But now, 13 years into this line, the question is, are we getting anywhere? Are things being finished? What are the gaps that are left? Is it time to kind of like put a cap on some of these? So now that I have set that stage for you and shown you Crushing Crisis, let me now, oh, that's not what we want to do. We want to do the other one. There we go. Okay. Now, here's what we're going to do. And you saw a preview of the slide already, so let's just look at it. I have covered every classic line. Now let's talk about what classic means. Nothing. It means nothing. It's just Marvel doesn't even call them classic. We're just saying classic by contrast to modern, which is the other thing Marvel calls them. So when we say classic line, we mean a line usually of a character or a title that started sometime before the year 2000. And it ends usually sometime between 1997 and 2008, but even that's kind of murky. So I've collected here all of the lines that applies to. And we'll talk about if each of these lines would have a modern version or not. So I know Alien is not the most exciting one because it's not a Marvel character. Let's go to a character we all know, Spider-Man. So I just want to explain the anatomy of this. Then I'll look at a couple of questions for you. Then we're going to dive in. So every line has the name of the line. It says the start and the end of that issue range. And then it says each of the gaps of missing volumes, some of which could be more than one volume. And then I can talk about what's in those gaps so we can figure out what are we waiting for. And the great thing about this is I tried to design it in such a way that you really could just take a screenshot. It even has the little quick URL to get to the guide at the bottom. And that's something I want to mention. Thanks to the support of patrons, and people have been following the after shows know this, that I have moved Crushing Crisis to a totally new server in the past couple of months. Actually, a totally new host, a very professional host used industry-wide. And because of that, I can do more fun tricks in the background, like adding 150 short URLs 5 minutes before the show. So now you don't have to remember the name of the whole guide. You can just type crushingcrisis.com Spider-Man. You can type crushingcrisis.com Spider-Man, no hyphen, Spider-Man hyphen. It's still going to work. And so now when I show these guides, I can actually just say, by the way, if you want to see the guide, just go to crushingcrisis.com/Spider-Man and you can get a complete reading order. Because the whole idea of Crushing Crisis is like, I got tired of sites where you had to click on each collection to see the next collection, or maybe you could see them in a list, but you couldn't see what was in them too. I wanted something that was deep and wide, and so that you could like see the whole list of collections, but then you also could see what was in them all, and you could understand how they all fit together. So here's all of the Iron Man Epic Collections, and we'll get to Iron Man in just a moment. So that's a lot of explaining what Epic Collections are. You've been very patient with me, but hopefully that brings you all along for the ride. So let me just take a look at the comments and see if anybody has any big comments. No, Easy Retro, I do not do super chats. Just so you know, YouTube actually takes a lot of profit off the top of super chats, which is great, and you should super chat to the channels that ask for it and that request it. I would rather have you at some point find the time to join Patreon. For the price of 2 super chats, you could be a Patreon member for a whole year, and then we have a more direct relationship. So I do not do that. I always recommended some of my early videos by YouTube. Well, I mean, that might be happening again soon because I might be moving in the next year. Okay. And yes, I did make a Golden Girls reference. All right, seems like a lot of these are kind of just people saying their favorite things about omnis and epics and battling the desire for both. Clearly, I have lost that battle and I buy both Websinger UK. So this is a really good point. So Nick was saying, I was initially really confused about the purpose of the epic line because it seemed so random. And like I said, it did seem random because at first you were getting kind of like the least interesting chunks of series, and then also collecting from the beginning, which overlapped Masterwork. So it was kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? And then over time, as it became clear that Marvel was really going to fill in all of the gaps, then it started to be like, oh, this is what we're doing here. And it started to become like a little bit more legible and understandable. And so at first, the kind of random release, especially because at first they were really non-sequential. I mean, it was truly Shatter Snot. I don't know. But it was truly that. And so like people who were into Iron Man would be like, wait, I have like volume 13 and I have volume 18. Like, what is this? And it's not like every single one of them explained like this will be non-sequential. So it was pretty tricky at first to understand. Okay, now enough preamble. Let's get to it. Let me remove this to the stage and add this to the stage and start with Aliens. Okay, so let's talk about Aliens, shall we? So Aliens didn't start out as a Marvel property. Of course, we know this. Aliens is a property that was owned by Dark Horse, or I should say licensed by Dark Horse, for a long, long time. And then when Marvel got all the Fox and Disney licenses, Alien Comics came along with it. So Marvel released a whole series of Aliens omnibuses. They don't have anything that's Aliens Predator or Alien Prometheus. They're just Aliens. And although they do go all the way into like 2016 or 19, and all of those have been released. They're 4 omnibuses. Some of them are harder to find now than others. But then Marvel also started following that in Epic Collections. But they were really big omnibuses. So they've been releasing these Epic Collections in order. It started in 1988 with the first one. And that was Aliens 1988 #1. Now, how far might this go? Well, we've got 4 volumes so far. And so the missing volumes are volumes 5+. And as you can see from that teeny tiny box, there's a lot of stuff still to go. We're not quite done Omnibus 2. So we need to get through all of Omnibus 3, except for one thing. And then Omnibus 4 is actually a lot of things that are more modern than what the classic line would be. And we've never seen with any of the licenses. No, I guess we've seen with Star Wars that Marvel will go pretty modern and not kind of rename the line or retitle the line. So if this was just a Marvel character, we would say, oh, well, we've probably just got to get through Omnibus 3. Probably it's like another 2 Epic Collections, and that will get us to 1999. But since all of this alien stuff was presented all in one omnibus line without the omnibus line switching to modern or anything like that, actually it's very possible they will just keep collecting all the way to 2019, which would bring us all the way to the end of those 4 alien omnibuses that exist. So this has been coming out rather slowly so far. We've been getting 1 per year, so I guess not that slowly, but they made me a little nervous because it was getting like later in the year. The first one was March, then there was an August, then there was November, then this year we pulled it back to October for the next one. So hopefully over the course of the next 3 or 4 years we will knock out all of these here, but we haven't seen any reprints on any of them yet. So if you've been looking for those first couple, the one from 2023 and 2024, probably you want to grab them if you are able, because they could be going away. And yes, Suspicious Sludge, that is Ninjas versus Aliens on that one, which is the next series, I think, in sequence, which is Music of the Spheres. Look, I know this is really tiny. That's kind of part of the point here, which is that Crushing Krisis has 16 years of collection information, especially for some of these characters like Spider-Man, where I started at the very beginning of Crushing Crisis. So like trying to give it to you all on one slide is crazy. And I thought about like, should I make these slides publicly available? No, the whole point is that the answer is on Crushing Crisis. Even for the epic collections, it says like these epics are missing these books. So if you just go to crushingcrisis.com/alienscomics, you can have a hyphen or not, you'll see this guide, but I will tell you this is a patron only guide. So you only see it if you're a patron of Crushing Crisis. Now let's talk about Spidey. And here's the interesting and somewhat annoying thing about this Amazing Spider-Man line is it really is just Amazing Spider-Man, except for when things cross over a lot. So it doesn't have Web of Spider-Man, it doesn't have Spectacular Spider-Man, it doesn't have adjectiveless Spider-Man, except when they cross over a lot, which is all the friggin' time in the 90s. So if Marvel had to do this all over again, would they just make it an all-in-one Spider-Man line the way they're doing with X-Men right now? Maybe. I mean, it would take 4 times the volumes to do, but Spider-Man's popular and kind of endlessly sellable. So we're in a weird situation right now, where once this gets into the clone era, which is kind of where we are with a lot of it right now, I think the most recently announced one, it gets through one issue of Amazing Spider-Man because there's so many other things happening in other comics. There's one-shots, there's graphic novels. So we're creeping through Amazing Spider-Man. But then if you scroll back to like older ones, like this first gap at volume 14, there's a ton of other series running along Amazing Spider-Man right here. There's Spectacular Spider-Man. I think Web of Spider-Man had started or was just about to start. I think just about to start. It starts after 263, if memory serves. And Marvel Team Up. So it's kind of annoying, but this is the way that it is. So this line only collects Spider-Man, and we know where the switch is going to happen to modern. And what's really interesting about this, and it's very illustrative, so I like that it's the first Marvel book, is that the switch to modern is not just at a certain year, it's not just at a certain series break, it's actually at a creator change. So it's at the change from J. Michael Straczynski taking over Spider-Man with Spider-Man 1998 number 30. So it's like midway through a series. And it's not that it happened at a certain year or a certain cutoff. It was just that's when people think of like the modern run of Spider-Man beginning. So that's when it switches to modern. So we'll actually have a number of issues from that 1998 series here in this classic line, which we didn't know at first. We only know now because Marvel has started to put out modern epics. And so now we kind of see where the stop points are. So let's talk about what's on the slide. The issue range of Spider-Man is from Amazing Fantasy number 15, of course, the famous debut of Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man number 1, and then it ends with Amazing Spider-Man 1999 number 29. There on the left, you can see the cover of the first epic collection, Great Power. So it runs from 1962 to 2001, and we have 3 gaps in this line right now, and I'll spoil now, no line has more than 3 gaps. It doesn't mean anymore anyway. It doesn't mean that there's not more than 3 volumes to do. It just means in those, there are only 3 gaps, which might be filled with multiple volumes. In this case, it's a lot of volumes. So there's 1 gap for volume 14. Volume 14 is the stuff that's pretty much like right before the alien costume saga. And I think the reason that they've left this one empty is because it's just in this period that's being really attacked by omnibuses right now. The Masterworks were just getting to this point. It's the material that starts with 242. So it just felt like Marvel didn't want to compete with themselves to get the material out. Now, in hindsight, it probably would have been better if they released this material like a year or 2 ago to get ahead of it. But such as it is, I do think that we'll be hanging for a while for volume 14. Then there is volume 16. That is, so obviously just one away from that. And that is the stuff that takes us right up to just before the Todd McFarlane and Michelini years. There's one more volume that goes after that before the McFarlane stuff, which is, of course, the very, very famous Kraven's Last Hunt. That is volume 17. This one famously has been the one that Epic fans are the most twisted and want the most because volume 15 came out in 2014. Volume 17 came out in 2017. So we've been waiting for this for almost a decade to fill in this 1 volume gap in the middle. And I understand why they did those other 2 because they're actually demanded material. But if you go with the original Epic Collection remit of like, this is not supposed to be the most hotly demanded material, then why don't we have it? And then volumes 31 plus. Now I know that doesn't look like a lot of issues of Amazing Spider-Man. You're like 405 to 441 and 1 to 29. Like, okay, that's like what, 60, 70 issues? That's like 3 epics. Yeah, but in this period is the entire Clone Saga and Ben Reilly saga. And as I've mentioned, as Marvel slowly moves through those, some of those epic collections only have like 1 Spider-Man issue each. And then even after that, the line does cross over pretty regularly. It's not full on Superman Triangle years, but personally for me, for moi, I would want to see them keep interweaving the whole line from that point forward. I think it'll be a big fail if they don't, but that would take a lot more books. So we just don't know how Marvel's going to do it. They haven't crossed that barrier in Epic Collections right now. It's minimum 8+ books, but I think it's actually a lot more than that. And again, it will depend on if they vary things more after the Clone Saga ends, like if they'll include the other titles or not. Bip Bam Pow Pod, yo, Johnny, I was just talking to this weekend because I haven't seen him for so long. Do the epics collect more than the omnibus for the Clone Saga? No, because at least not so far, because the omnibuses are very, very complete. I think Samantha probably knows better than me, but I think if there's anything that they omitted, there might be like one graphic novel that came out in that period that was not directly Clone Saga related, but that period of Spider-Man is really well picked over and really well mapped. Samantha's saying post-Clone 90s Spidey's surprisingly so good and no one talks about it. But Samantha, I think that's often because things aren't well collected. Like there's this radio silence when things aren't collected. I was just talking to Omnidog, Jess, about this weekend, not in a stream, just having a chat with him about the idea of like people don't know things exist until they get collected, because then they wind up on Marvel Unlimited and then everybody becomes aware of them. Yes, I think it's nuts that they did not start Modern Spidey at Volume 2, Number 1, like right at 1999, Superjob says. I think it's a weird choice. I get that they wanted to say, like, especially knowing the direction the movies are going in, they're like, JMS, this is where it's at. This is where to begin. Because some of that stuff before him is, like, not as great. But I do think it's weird that they arbitrarily kind of picked that point. And Potato Evolution pointing out Marvel Masterworks, that's what MMW means for us insiders, Volume 27, that came out at the end of last year, just got us through all the material in Volume 16, so all the material for those gaps are ready to be collected in Epics, and they successfully avoided co-marketing at the same time. Masterworks usually sell out within a year, so there will be a chance. Okay, I'm going to move on from Spider-Man. I think once you hear me start talking about the gaps, that's when you have to start getting your questions in, because we're going to move on. We have 50 plus of these to get through, by the way. There's 50 plus lines, and we're talking about the completed lines too. So the next line alphabetically is Ant-Man, Giant Man. Did you know this is a line? So Ant-Man, Giant Man starts out with all the adventures of Hank Pym, but as it continues, it also has the scope to increase to Giant Man, Black Goliath, Bill Foster, as well as Ant-Man, Scott Lang. So it starts with Hank Pym's debut in Tales to Astonish number 27. Where would it end? So I did a lot of looking into this. I think potentially it might end in 1994 with Marvel double feature Avengers Giant Man 382. It's basically like a flip book style version that had a Giant Man backup story, and it has, I think, multiple of the Giant Man characters in it. Then I second guessed myself, like after doing this, boo, but I know it's like, you know, that's just the way, because there is a 2000 era one shot called Ant-Man's Big Christmas, and it's never been collected. So actually, I think that's the last book. So see, we've already come to a slide where I already have a collection. I think, but in reality, this really does go to 1995. It would collect every significant thing from Bill Foster. It would collect all of the major Scott Lang appearances other than when he's a member of the Fantastic Four. It's just that there's one more issue that I just wasn't thinking about when I put this together, which is Ant-Man's Big Christmas. It's literally the next time that Hank Pym kind of appears as Ant-Man, and it's in the year 2000. So here we go. One strike already. We're on the third slide. The thing about this that's really attractive to me, though, is a lot of times what Epic Collections do is they're going back and kind of recollecting old trade paperbacks that have existed, but rather than reprinting them, getting them all into the Epic Collection brand and sometimes correcting past mistakes. In this case, Scott Lang did have a paperback that had a lot of his classic material all pretty well sequentially, and so this would perfectly collect that, but it would also collect the rest of the Bill Foster stuff and any kind of solo anthology stuff that has Hank Pym as Ant-Man. Now, is this likely to happen? Really? Like, no. I think it's shocking that we got two, but we got two because that had to cover all of the Silver Age stuff and takes us into the Bronze Age. I think that they can knock all of this out, I think, in 2 more books. So maybe if Ant-Man appears, you know, he's going to be in the Marvel movies coming up. Maybe there's still a shot, but I'm not holding out a hope. As other lines close, though, it is tempting to like keep plugging away at these lines, but I do think that Marvel left things like this at a stopping point where they did, so they could kind of just wash their hands of it. And by the way, that first volume came out in 2015. 2015. A second volume came out in 2023. So we're already waiting 8 years. Is it going to be until 2031 until we get a third volume? I don't know. And I don't know that Ant-Man is the most marketable of Marvel heroes. So I just don't know. That Giant Man flipbook is in the Avengers Epic. That is true, Rascal Wolf. But again, if they were to extend this line, it probably would pick that up too. Yes, and Lance, I have to think that Ant-Man is not a big seller comparatively. Logan's got a scoop, but looking forward to watching the video later. Thank you for stopping by at all. Okay, let's look at the next one. Avengers. This is a huge one, and I did not realize until doing this just how close we are to being totally finished. So Avengers just collects the main flagship Avengers title. It starts with Avengers 1963, number 1. It's going to end with Avengers 1998-84, just prior to Avengers Disassembled. How do we know this? Because the modern Avengers Epic line, which is actually called the New Avengers Epic line, starts with Avengers Disassembled. So we have to go right up until that. And that's what I mean, that we're going to see some differences, because you're going to see some lines where the modern stuff starts in 1998, but here we have the whole 1998 series that's going to be in this classic line before it switches over to a modern line. So there's no rules. So this is going to go from 1963 to 2004. And I did not realize until I did this, in terms of getting all the way through the first 1963 volume of Avengers, we're now missing one volume. Volume 15. That's based on the newest announcements that we've just had. That is wild, because volume 14, Absolute Vision, came out a few months ago, earlier this year. And then the volume that takes us through all of the Heroes Reborn is going to come out in 2027. So this is one book away from being complete. Now, what's really interesting is there's such a small gap in that book. It's only Avengers 255 to 263 in Annual 14, but it's probably going to repeat Marvel graphic novel Emperor Doom there, even though it's been collected in other places. So I do think that there's a couple of other things that's going to make it lengthier, but it is there are a couple of these remaining volumes where it almost feels like Marvel has been saving them, because they're like, what are we going to put in that? I'm sure there's something else. Maybe it's like Avengers Spotlight stories or something. I don't know. But that's really cool that there's only one more volume, and it is right in the middle of that Roger Stern run, which is, of course, a very beloved run of Avengers with, as you see on the cover there, Monica Rambeau at the helm. It's from 1985 to 1986. Then we would be done, right? But only done the 1963 volume. Then in 1996, Avengers relaunches as part of Heroes Reborn. Then in 1998, it launches in a very, very famous run by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. And that has never been collected in Epic Collections, although we've had 100 different versions of collecting that before. So this will absolutely push into that. And it's very popular and it sells very well. And it's probably going to take, I would say, 4 or 5 Epic Collections to get through. And so I think that this is actually a really positive example of Marvel realizing they don't want to milk this cow forever. Like, at a point, they have to have collected the complete classic Epic Collections and just put it to bed, because you can't, if you keep people waiting forever, they will just give up. And 13 years does kind of feel like forever. So I would not be surprised if we get volume 15 later in 2027 or in 2028, and Marvel starts really mining that 1998 range of this title. And that's actually why I think they decided to push, because for a while we really thought almost every Epic Collection would end its line in 1998 other than Wolverine. That really seemed like what was going to be the case for many, many years. And so I think what Marvel kind of figured out is like, oh, a lot of these 1998 things are popular enough that we're going back to repeat them repeatedly. You know, we saw that with Captain America and Thor. They've had multiple editions of their 1998 series. And so is this Avengers title. And so Marvel's like, actually, it kind of benefits us more to pull that into the classic Epic Collection to keep the Epic Collections alive and have things to continue to market. So let's see. Just going back a slide, Doom Vader Dan J says we got Ant-Man 2 Epic because of the movie, which is Marvel times things to movies all of the time. Yarn Paul is saying Busiek Epics is the dream. Libomaya says, I love this, but it's late, so we'll watch another day. Great work. Thank you. I really appreciate that. This modern line maybe should have started at Heroes Return, but again, I kind of point out what my thinking is on that. We can talk more in the after show about if Marvel's ever going to do with compendiums, because Jose Morinho Special One says, I agree with the endpoint, but in theory, Modern Avengers Volume 1 could start before New Avengers Volume 1, though unlikely. No, that's an interesting point. So since New Avengers is called the modern, that's a really good point that I did not think about. That is really smart. Because they titled that next line New Avengers, I think I've got it right here, actually. Oh, Is this the first one? This is not the first one. It's number 2, but I just happen to have it right here. So this is a modern epic collection. And let me hold it next to that Iron Man so you can see the difference of the spines. So the modern epic collections, it just has a much tinier font, and the font's in the color of the character, whereas the title is in white. So it's kind of like reversed from this. And on the classic ones, they're single color portraits. On the modern ones, they're full color portraits. And on the modern one, the covers have the sidebar that has all of the creator names in them. Whereas in the classic ones, it is just a full cover just with the Epic Collection thing at the top. This does not have Epic Collection at the top. It's just got a sidebar. So the good point that is being made there that I want to highlight is actually this line could be over with volume 28 that we're getting in early in 2027, and they could do a modern line that rather than continuing with volumes 29 plus, they could just call it Avengers Modern Collection. Here's why I don't think that's going to happen, because New Avengers covers everything Avengers other than Mighty Avengers from 2004 all the way to 2012, and there's nothing else to put in a modern Avengers line except for that little Basic run. On the other hand, having a little kind of 5 and done run in that period is very attractive. I don't know. We just don't know. I mean, that's a really good point. And this is why that I can only base things on the data. But it's, you know, from a prognosticating standpoint, we can only go by the data we have. And we haven't seen them handle a book like this before, where there's like a restart and then another restart. And if they're going to put both of the restarts in the same era or not. Whew, that my head was totally heating up. And also, again, pointing out that I'm not perfect. Emperor Doom was already in Judgment Day. Yeah, that's true. I might have it there because it's in reading order there. So that is incorrect. That doesn't even have Emperor Doom, in which case, what the frig is going to go in that other than those 9 issues? There's got to be something else. But this is not primarily a mapping stream. And so this is just to give you, as I always say, an idea of what could go in there. If you want things perfectly mapped, you can go to Crushing Krisis. You can go to crushingkrisis.com/Avengers and see all of my Avengers guides arrayed there. Let's continue to another Avengers guide, Avengers West Coast. This one is completed, or is it? So the issue range of this starts with West Coast Avengers 1984. That was the original miniseries. It's just 4 issues. Then West Coast Avengers 1985 starts the ongoing. Then it changes its name to Avengers West Coast in 1989. Some sources have that as its own volume. Some don't, because it didn't change in the indicia right away. They probably changed it to put it alphabetized in the A's in the previews catalog, so it would be right next to the rest of the Avengers titles. Now, for a long time, this was a title that had been covered many times in the front half of it. We had those Marvel Premiere classic hardcovers. We've had it in omnibus, then we got it in epics, and then we had a couple picky choosy trades at the end, and we just never had the full end of this title. Finally, now the Epic Collections have collected the full end of this title, and volume 8, which is the one that was just announced, is going to be out. It's called Terminated, and it's going to be out this December, and that is going to end this line in 8 volumes. So you can see the complete contents of it below. It takes us from, oh, it doesn't, see, not 1963. Nope, that's not when it started. It should be 1984. See, well, you know, that's why we learn, we grow, things change. So from 1984 into the 90s. Now, here's the question, and why there's a question mark there about if we are actually going to end there or not. Because if you do not know, this title pretty much continued with a very similar cast, but a very different art style and theme into a book called Forceworks that launched in 1994. And it ran for a while, had a big crossover through it, and we've never had it totally comprehensively collected. So the question is whether it would be just easier to market Forceworks by just calling it, probably with all the crossovers, maybe 3 more issues of this Avengers West Coast line, or if eventually they would just call it a Forceworks line. I don't know. And we've never had a line for a team title that I can think of follow the title to a totally different title. We've had Defenders continue to New Defenders, but I can't think of any time like a team name changed and the book followed the team name. So we just don't know how they're going to handle Forceworks. For the moment, we have to consider that this is complete. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't put the Terminatrix Objective miniseries into that last one, volume 8, but they did already collect it on the Avengers main Epic line. It just feels like it has a little bit more to do with this series for me. So I always kind of thought that it was going to go in there. But I absolutely love Avengers West Coast. I think if you've never read Avengers West Coast before, it's a slightly smaller version of Avengers. They're not dealing with as big world-shaking problems. The problems they're dealing with feel a lot more personal to who the cast is. So you get a lot more of a relationship with the cast, especially with Scarlet Witch, with Hawkeye. Yeah, I'm trying with, I think, who else is in it? They has like Tigra, there's a US Agent, War Machine, especially Hawkeye and Mockingbird, though, are very much the stars. It's Hawkeye's book for a lot of it. And I just feel like the main Avengers title kind of feels like about big things, and it's really an ensemble title, and that everybody in the ensemble has equal weight. This is an ensemble title in that everybody in the ensemble kind of gets a chance. Nancy Holcomb points out that New Mutants morphed into X-Force, but those are two different epic lines. So I wasn't saying I couldn't think of a time it's ever happened. I was trying to think of a time that a title morphed and the epic line followed, which that did not happen. John Byrne does do some of Avengers West Coast. Yes, right in the middle. Okay. Yeah, I really enjoy this. I think I like this more than most of regular Avengers. Okay. Superjob saying they struggle with the fact that they have B-listers on the roster, but that was my favorite part of it. But we know that I'm that kind of weirdo. Okay, let's continue to Black Panther. So Black Panther is absolutely, no question in my mind, completed, maybe, but I'm pretty sure. And that's because it starts with Black Panther's debut in Fantastic Four 1961, 52 and 53. That was in 1966. It runs to Marvel Comics 148, which is T'Challa's final 90s solo story. So it's 1966 to 1994. And since it's only 3 epic collections, I thought let's just put them all up there and say exactly what years they cover and what they contain. Now, here's why I'm pretty certain that this one's really done. As we all know, Black Panther has a 1998 series by Christopher Priest. The whole thing is by him. It's like 60 issues long. It is hugely famous. It took forever to get omnibuses. We have it in omnibus. We have it in paperback. And the epic collections would probably just reprint those paperbacks. I think, based on Daredevil's modern epic line starting in 1998 with a bombastic creator change and with a Marvel Knights kind of slightly more mature flavored title, I think there's no reason Marvel wouldn't do the same thing for Black Panther. Christopher Priest represents a huge sea change in the way that storytelling occurs with Black Panther. It would be deeply, deeply weird for me to see them market it under this classic epic line, and especially to not kind of have the fanfare of a Christopher Priest book being a volume 1 book. So this is a so sure I would bet money on it that we are done. This classic Black Panther. There's nothing else to do. They've only ever skipped like 3 issues that they ever could have put into this. I would have put his guest appearance in Excalibur into that 3rd one, personally, because I like it. It's by Alan Davis. There's nothing else to do. If you have these on your shelf, you have it, and Marvel's covered it every which way. The Marvel Masterworks actually went as far as the 90s, which is crazy. They never did that, but they wanted to complete Black Panther Masterworks, and the 2 Black Panther classic omnibuses have all this material too, so there's many different ways to have collected this. Okay, let's see. Saturday Morning Fan saying ForceWorks had a reboot event, a robot and a reboot event a few years ago also, which I loved because I really like ForceWorks. I'm a weirdo like that. Okay, Andy Holcomb saying you probably squeeze another epic volume out of guest appearances. I just don't think so. Because, well, here's the thing. There's going to be a couple of times you see that I've put in like an epic 0.5 because which is not really going to be labeled epic, but Marvel has occasionally, we'll talk about it when we get there, but they have occasionally put out like epic companions. We'll talk about it in just a slide or two. There's one right here. In fact, it might be the next slide. But Black Panther's guest appearances in the 80s that they glossed over this are so insignificant that I really wouldn't. Even looking at my guide, which, by the way, just go to crushingcrisis.com/Black Panther. Doesn't matter if you put a hyphen in or not. It really doesn't matter. They're so inconsequential. I struggled to even like find a reason to list them on there. Matt H agrees Priest would begin the modern. Yarnay Paul is saying modern Black Panther had a lot of complete collections, probably why the wait is so long for epics. Epics completely agree. And Sludge Lich saying I know Panther's Rage is highly regarded, but it's still undervalued. Same with Killraven too. We'll be talking about Killraven later. So there you go, Black Panther. It is. I would put a crisp $100 bill that this line is complete. There, I said it. Okay. Oh, one more comment. Saturday Morning Fan saying Black Panther took part in a Secret Wars 3 event in the 80s in the FF book. Marvel's convention for double dipping things in the epic collections is really interesting. So with Masterworks, it used to be that they would not double dip anything. They were like, if it's in one line, we're not repeating it, even if it's a key issue. They softened on that over the years. With the epic line, it feels like they mostly go for guest appearances if it's like a significant guest appearance for that character, like if it's plot significant to them. And if they just appear and it's like not a team up. It's different if it's like Marvel team up Black Panther and it's like a Black Panther story. But if they're just there, generally we have not seen the Epic collections do that. And that's been really instructional. Again, we can only prognosticate based on the data that we have. I would love to do a most wanted new Epic line poll. We'll talk about the lines we don't have at the end of this. Marvel hasn't asked. The only reason we did the DC Finest poll is because DC asked. Okay, now let's talk about Black Widow, which is absolutely completed. We know this one for a fact. I don't even have to bet you any money on it. So the issue range of Black Widow starts with Black Widow's debut in Tales of Suspense 52. And then it continues to a solo story that she stars in Journey into Mystery in the 90s after the title changed over from the Thor numbering back to Journey into Mystery while Thor was in the Heroes Reborn Pocket Universe. So that means the range of this is 1964 to 1998. How do we know that it's complete? Because they've already started the Black Widow Modern line, and the Black Widow Modern line starts immediately after this in 1999. So here's an example where they're not waiting to go into the 2000s. And it makes sense because the Black Widow book that launched in 1999 was a very different flavor. It had that kind of modern Marvel Knights-y feel to it. It would be really weird to put it in the same lineup as this classic stuff. Now, you'll notice that even though there are only 2 Epic collections in this line, and then the year ranges are at the bottom there, I've inserted one other book in the middle. And there's only, I think, 3 times in this whole show that I'll talk about something like that. And that is this book, Black Widow Marvel Team Up. Because this has a lot of times that she is the team up in a book, as she is here with Spider-Man, that are not collected in the Epic line, which I'll never understand because this is such a short book. It's only 200 pages. So they could have just like split it in half between those 2 other Black Widow epics, which are kind of on the slim side for epics, honestly. And, it would have been just fine. So there are a few instances. I really think it's only 2, but one more I'd really like to see, and one more that's possible, where there's stuff collected that's off to the side of a main run that just for some reason did not fit into the epic. I'll never understand it. Again, maybe they just didn't want to do that much double dipping in the epics at the time that they were designing them, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. So if you want the complete Black Widow, the truly complete Black Widow, you want that book. And the crazy thing about that is it came out in the same year as the first epic. And then, my brain is freezing up because it annoys me so fucking much. So they had the chance to map that stuff into another epic. Now, to be fair, it's only stuff from Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Team Up, and some stuff from Marvel Comics Presents. But again, those are her issues. That was what her story was because she didn't have an ongoing title at that time. Don't get me started. It's a absolutely pure Marvel mapping fail. If I could just put some kind of suggestion on why it failed that hard, it's because they wanted the epics to mirror the contents of the omnibus, and they hadn't put that stuff in the omnibus. But that's a shitty reason. There's plenty of epics that are better in mapping than omnibus. So I just don't really decide. And Andy Holcomb saying you would need a bunch of Daredevil. And, you know, that's tricky with Black Widow because she's a character who didn't have her own home book. And so when she was a co-star in the Daredevil San Francisco years, that really is her book. So if you really wanted to do a complete Black Widow read, the epic collections are just not going to do it for you. So if you want to go to Crushing Crisis, it's a public guide. It's not a Patreon guide. It's one I'm pretty proud of. It's at crushingcrisis.com/Black Widow. And you can see the perfectly in order, every epic collection, every guest appearance version of Black Widow. Okay, let's move on to Blade, the Vampire Slayer, a line that I thought that Marvel had forgotten about because we just had 1 volume. And then in the volume number 1, we only had volume number 2 actually, and there's a reason, and I'll say why. Volume number 1 is going to come out in October. So let's talk about Blade. He made his first appearance in Tomb of Dracula, 1972, number 10, and I am 100% confident that this classic line would end with Blade 1999 1-6 and half issues. So that means the range of this is 1973 through 2000, and so far we've gotten 20 years into that, which is a lot of Blade material, but he has a lot of material in the 90s. So the reason they put out that volume 2 before they put out the volume 1 is because we had everything in the volume 1 already in a Blade omnibus, and so it was kind of like we were just going to put out an epic collection that was the same as the omnibus. They probably wanted to well and truly sell through and have a pause period after the omnibus had come out before they put out this epic collection. So they started with volume 2, which only had 4 issues in common with the omnibus, but mostly was collecting his Midnight Suns era 90s series, Night Stalkers, just a few issues of it. But we had never had any of that collected before, and so that was like a great incentive to start collecting. And also those 4 issues of Tomb of Dracula 1991 are huge. They're like 48 pages each. And so that's why this first one can have a whole omnibus of stuff. It's a whole omnibus minus those 4 issues, but those 4 issues are 200 pages together. And so that omnibus, that Blade omnibus, was not a very long omnibus to begin with. So if you take off 200 pages, it is exactly the length of this volume 1 epic, and that's how that works. I love Tomb of Dracula, and the weird thing is with Blade, you do have to double dip a lot, and so Blade double dips a ton of Tomb of Dracula, but he does have his own stories in Marvel Preview Magazine, and a few in Vampire Tales, but this is one kind of unusual one in that it is like all double dips. The volume 1 is, before he gets to his own original material. Now, I would love to see these volume 3 plus of this, because A, the rest of Night Stalkers, which runs for another year after what we have, has never been collected comprehensively, only in so much as it crosses over with Ghost Rider. Then he makes a number of appearances in Marvel Sons Unlimited that it would be nice to have together. Then he has a number of short series, which I think eventually did all get collected in trade paperback, but they're like a series of like slim, kind of imperfect trade paperbacks, and it would just be so nice to get it all in epic collections, because he has a lot of short run series. He has Blade the Vampire Hunter in 1994, which actually is a little bit before the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, which is just funny to me. And then he has a one shot in 1998, and then he has another one shot in 98, and then he has a 3-issue series, and it's kind of like all picked and choosed. And by the way, the main chunk of that, which is the biggest, longest running series, Blade the Vampire Hunter 1994, has never been collected, and that will, I don't know, I guess the next epic might be able to crack into it a little bit. It depends on how much crossover material they have. This is at least 2 more epics, possibly 3 more epics, depending on how much Ghost Rider crossover materials that they do. Yeah, this, I believe, is this a Patreon guide? Let me just look. Yes, this is a Patreon guide, but it's a Marvel guide, so I'm thinking you might be able to just pledge $1 a month, which is, I swear it's going to go up as soon as they have a time to friggin' make it happen. So you could go and pledge right now and have access to this guide for the hot price of $1. And this guide has all that stuff in reading order. Or, you know what, if you're too cheap to pay $1, whip out your magnifying glass, because that's exactly the reading order that is in the guide. Eddie Lorena wanted volume 1 or volume 3 instead of volume 1. I agree. I want that volume 3 bad. That's probably, if we were doing like Epic Most Wanted, probably top 10 for me. Although you're going to see, there's really not a lot of missing stuff. Yarny Pauls loves early 90s Blade and calls it rad. Blade and Tomb of Dracula, Vampire Tales to Night Stalkers Back to Blade is an example of a name change within a single line. Great point. Great point. Night Stalkers in specific, right? It goes from being Blade to being Night Stalkers. He's the lead, but it's called Night Stalkers, and it's in the Blade epic line, which we did not know was going to happen. And then he goes back to Blade, which is going to happen. This is a perfect example of how I can have Force Works in the Avengers West Coast line. Thank you, Andy Holcomb. Okay. Yes, and here's the thing. The modern stuff that after this, there's a little bit of a pause before we get into modern stuff. And then again, the tone of it is so different. There's a Marvel Max series in 2002 of Blade, and it's in continuity, even though it's Marvel Max. Now, I don't know. I don't think we've had them put a Max series in Epic Collection yet, so I just don't know if that's possible. But then the next series after that Marvel Max series is another Tomb of Dracula in 2004, and then Blade in 2006. So there's a very obvious, very clear year separation and tonal separation there. And Froggoat saying we've done the same thing with the Black Widow squeezed in between that. I also do that with an Iron Fist book, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, I really love Blade. I'm so excited he has an Epic Collection, so that's really, really cool for me. And if you want to see more about Blade and his reading order, to go to crushingcrisis.com/Blade. By the way, doing the show allowed me to set up all of these short codes. I've wanted to do this for years, and my old web host wasn't possible because when we switched from an Apache server to an Nginx server, they didn't give me permission to set these redirects on the server level. I know that's like way inside baseball. So the fact that I was working on the show and I just wanted to say like, Catchy, go here. And I realized, oh my gosh, I finally can do it. And that only is possible because of Patreon, because this new web host situation, it's very expensive. It's a huge drain on my resources, but the site works so much better now. And it does all the things that a professional website should, such as being able to make server level redirects. And that only exists because people pledged on Patreon. Literally, I would not be able to afford it. It is outside of my means, if not for Patreon. So it is huge appreciation to be able to do this. And I spent the whole morning, I woke up early and I set redirects for all of the major Marvel guides. So now, even if you kind of go fishing and you're like, it's probably Crushing Crisis / blah, and you just guess for Marvel, it probably will take you to that place. Okay. Nick pointing out there have been some pre-Max mature readers Marvel graphic novels in the classic line. So that is really, really handy knowledge. And also some of the modern Black Widow was Max and it's in the epics. Okay, Rascal Wolf. See, this is why I like doing a live show, because I truly don't know everything. I know bibliography, I know data, I know trends, but I really don't know everything about Marvel and how it's been collected. And if I was just doing this without comments, I would say a bunch of lies. So now, oh, Captain, why did that break onto 2 lines? It's not, I swear that's not like that. Quality control has been through this presentation, and it did not break onto 2 lines in the actual presentation. I demand a recount. We're going to reload this. This is a miscarriage of justice. You're probably like, what are they talking about? But that's not what it looks like. Okay, let's just pause for a second. I think we learned that I need to remove it to the studio and then add it back into the studio and then go back to the screen and then add it to the stage. And this would have the fix I made to Avengers 2. Okay. No, it's still in 2 lines. All right, well, I don't know why, but in my presentation, you have to believe me that I wouldn't actually let something look like that. Okay. So, Captain America. This begins not in the Golden Age, but a Volume 1 that's numbered Volume 1, and it starts with Captain America's return from the ice in Avengers number 4. Here's the thing. We don't know for sure when this one is going to end. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Here's the exciting thing about the Captain America epic line. If you are the kind of person who's been saying in the comments, the epic shouldn't go past 1996. They should just be the original series. That should be it. Guess what, baby? You got your wish on this one, because this one, as of now, or as of November, with the release of Epic Volume 8, The Lazarus Conspiracy, this will have the entirety of Captain America's 1968 series and the Tales of Suspense stuff that is the precursor collected. Done. Finished. This is an example of Marvel. They have skipped ahead by 1. They did start kind of showing us what the direction is going to be after that, but they're not leaving any gaps the way we saw in Spider-Man, the way we saw in Avengers. The classic Cap will be done. So what is Volume 23, you say? Volume 23 is going to be exclusively Heroes Reborn. It's going to be all of Cap in the Pocket Universe, those 12 issues, plus there's some crossover issues from the other titles. I think all of them have the number 12s from all 4 titles. So if you've never had that Heroes Reborn Cap stuff, there's your chance. That will be Volume 23. What gets really interesting is Volume 25 plus. We already know that we have Volume 24, which broke into that 1998 series. It's called American Nightmare, and it collects issues 1 through 14 of that 1998 series. Is pretty well regarded. It's written by Mark Waid with art from Ron Garney, and it actually just came out at the end of 2025, so I think you should still be able to grab that one. We also know that where the Modern line for this starts, because we have Modern Volume 1. It's the beginning of Ed Brubaker's run in 2005. However, this leaves us with sort of an interesting question, because that 1998 series runs 50 issues. It'll probably take 2 more epics to get there. It's all been collected in omnibus, and this will have everything in the omnibus. But the great thing that will happen over the course of that is there is some stuff not by Waid that was not in the omnibus that happens right at the end of that run, and it's never been well collected, and I'm kind of obsessed with it because it transitions Captain America into a little bit of a different tone as he becomes a Marvel Knights title. And so I would love to see that stuff in this line, and there's no reason to think it won't be in this line. So Captain America Dead Men Running, which has never been collected. Captain America What Price Glory, which has never been collected. Captain America and Nick Fury The Otherworld War, original graphic novel, which I think has only ever been its own original graphic novel. That should all be in the epic line. The thing that gets kind of interesting, intriguing here is that then Captain America is relaunched as a Marvel Knights title in 2002, and it only runs for 32 issues. I really would have thought that that would have been the start of modern epic numbering. Everything else that starts a Marvel Knights title has gotten a modern Marvel epic to go with that title. So it was like, I was like, really? You're not gonna? It would only be 2. But I think Marvel just got enamored with making the first Brubaker volume 1 to be like, start here, Ed Brubaker, one of our famous runs of all time. And it truly is one of their best runs of all time. So I think they kind of like got so obsessed with that they're gonna have to do the final 2 volumes of this being Marvel Knights Captain America, which is so weird because tonally it is not like the classic books. Also, that also raises the question of if we're gonna put Captain America and the Falcon in this line too, because that happens before the Brubaker run. And actually I didn't include that there on that slide. So see, nobody's perfect, especially not me. So the one thing I was thinking is maybe they make another modern epic line that's called like Captain America Marvel Knight, and they put those 32 issues and they put the Captain America and the Falcon stuff in there too. I just don't I just don't really know what they're going to do. It's a very, very, very strange division. And Artunism is actually mentioning that Cap and the Falcon by Priest going into epics and how we really just don't know where that's going to be. X-Men's going to be a problem, and we will talk. Luckily, it is last alphabetically, so we'll talk about it when we get there. And, you know, Nick coming to the same conclusion as me, since Brubaker Cap is Volume 1, all of that Marvel's Night Cap would have to go in this line or get its own line. Superjob pointing out that technically all of those Hero Reborn series, that was Avengers, Captain America, Fantastic Four, and Iron Man, that started in 1996 and ran for 12 issues, except for they didn't run for 12 issues. They ran for 13 issues, but we've never seen the 13th issues collected because they included Wildstorm characters, because technically Wildstorm was licensing those Marvel characters and making those books on the behalf of Marvel, which means those issue 13s are unreprintable by Marvel, and Marvel has just treated them as if they don't even exist. Yes, I was thinking the Leafield picture of Cap was actually one of the covers, so I was like looking for it, but I think it was just promotional art or like a variant cover or something, so I didn't get to use it. Saturday Morning Fan saying, one sad thing is many epics are missing giveaway comics like Captain America Bubble Fun and Cat vs. Skull in space to cash in on Star Wars. I agree, there's a lot of giveaway comics and inserts. Spider-Man had a lot of them in the 90s too, that I think DC is doing a better job of tracking that stuff down for DC Finest than Marvel did for the epic collections. Would I recommend Cap by Grunwald as a good jumping on point? Hell yes. Cap by Grunwald is like Claremont level writing on Captain America. Absolutely. Okay, I think we're going to continue, but I'm going to say hello to Batnessa the Witch. No Batman in this stream, all Marvel, but very, very fun. So Captain America, I mean, they are obviously going to collect that other stuff, especially because we've completed all of the Captain America that comes before it. So like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, but happen somehow. Anyway, but eventually it'll happen, and we just don't know if it'll be under the same title or not. Okay, I'm so angry about that breaking to 2 lines. You have no idea how long I spent proving this, and it looked right in the actual presentation. All right, let's continue. Carnage. Okay. Now here we are in Carnage. Carnage is completed. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And we know for sure, it is completed. It starts with Cletus Cassidy's debut as Carnage. I think we'd been introduced to him as a character maybe already. First, I don't know, I have a Carnage guide that answers that question. In Amazing Spider-Man 361 to 363, and it pretty much collects everything Carnage, and Carnage really did not have his own title for almost this entire period. And so this is a truly, truly, truly double dippy book. And which is hilarious to me. And actually, so Cletus Cassidy makes his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 344 and 345, and then he's also in some subplot pages of 359 and 360. Let's pull this off the shelf and see if those subplot pages are in the book, shall we? Yes, they are. Excerpts from are in there. And this is why, you know, I forgot to say something else at the beginning, and this is worth saying now. Maybe I'll try to reload that Cap thing one more time and it'll fix itself. But I swear I did mean to say this. This is not just me stalling for time. So I collect every epic collection. And part of that is because I have a sickness, a collecting sickness. And it's like, I kind of joke, but I am slightly OCD, and it does create situations like this. But for moi, I have the site Crushing Krisis that's meant to explain every comic book ever, eventually, before I die, hopefully. And when I didn't have the physical books, it was really hard to do a guide for somebody like Moon Knight, right? Moon Knight had no collections. I think one, like Marvel Premiere Collection, and then 2 Essentials. So to do a Moon Knight guide was so hard because I had nothing to refer to. I pretty much was like just looking at comic book database, and I couldn't read or go through the issues. The epic collections have enabled me to, for any character, go to my shelf and be like, I have everything. I can explain everything. This Carnage guide came out after the epic collections existed. And so it's like, I was able to describe everything that I'm able to describe here because of the epic collections. And I just forgot that this epic collection has that stuff excerpted at the beginning of it. So the epic collections, it's not me collecting them just to have everything, although I mean, certainly that's part of it. Let's see if Cap fixed itself that time, or if I'm just cursed. I'm cursed, so we're going to stop worrying about it. But also, like, having them all lets me do things like this. It helps me with my guides. It helps me when I have questions. It helps to just pull them off the shelf. And they are my reference library, you know? Like, I pull them off of the shelf all the time as reference. So, Carnage He's collected, and this takes us all the way through Toxin 2005, and also a flashback issue in 2009. And after that, we're into Modern Carnage. So like, there's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to squeeze in. These are already extremely comprehensive. If you get these 3 books, you will have all of 15 years of the birth and development of Carnage. And it's interesting because he's never a solo character in this. I mean, he has Carnage Mind Bomb, which is an OGN, but Carnage is a Wonderful Life, which is another original graphic novel, but really he just appears in other books. This is one of the few epic lines which is like pure appearances in other books. Doctor Doom is another one. So these are released in 2022, 2023, and 2024. They're already getting a little bit scarce, so I don't think it is going to be the easiest to grab all of them. And you can see this guide at crushingkrisis.com/carnage, which is a patrons only guide. And it has not only every issue, but I really did sit down and read every issue of Carnage, some of which were good, some of which weren't. And I explain the importance and what's skippable of every single issue. So it's not just a reading order. It truly is a reading guide. Doom Vader saying, I use the comic book price guide from Overstreet all the time as a reference. Yeah, those reference stuff is I love having stuff like that for reference. I wish I'd saved my old Wizard magazines. All right, next is Conan the Barbarian. This one hurts, y'all, because Conan got cut off at 6 volumes when Marvel lost the license because they were taking their sweet ass time and they were putting the volumes out in these slim, teeny tiny little volumes. Mine are too far off screen to just grab and wave at the camera, but they were this thin. See this Young Avengers volume? That's how thin the Conan volumes were. And this is beloved material, and it was kind of like, you could tell that Marvel was like, we're going to milk it. And for good reason, because they wanted to like subsidize the cost of the Conan license, but they had already restored a lot of this in the omnibus line. So it was not like they had to pay back the restoration costs. And it's so awful to see a collection format start and fail, and Marvel's actually not known for that. Marvel's known for generally almost finishing what they start. But these there's only 1 in 2020, then there were 3 in 2021, so credit for trying, and 2 in 2022, and then it just abruptly ends. But when you look at them, number 1 only had 13 issues, number 2 only had 13 issues, Number 3 only had 14 or 15 issues. These all could have been longer. They were all in the 280 to 360 page range, which is smaller than almost every other epic that ever exists. Many epics are in the 500 page range, all the way up to the very brush of 600. So it could have been twice as long, basically, and we could have gotten through all the way to 160, but there's still a lot of Conan to go. So the hope, and the reason I put it in here still, is not just to bemoan that it's canceled, but to show you, and this text is big enough that you actually might be able to read it. We had a lot left. We had to get all the way to 275, which the omnibuses have done. And then there's more Conan after that. First of all, the omnibuses don't have every Conan original graphic novel. Maybe these could have or would have. Then there's also Conan the Adventurer in 1994, Conan 1995, and then there's a series of Conan Returns miniseries that run from 1997 to 2000, all with 3 issues each. They've never been collected. I don't think Dark Horse ever got to them either. My Conan guide, you could go and look. I do believe it is a public guide. So just go to crushingkrisis.com/Conan and you can see for yourself. That Conan guide has everything from Marvel, everything from Dark Horse, and everything in his new Titan comics, which are incredible. Now, my hope is that since Titan Comics went, I might have made a mistake on the Conan one. Oh, no, it's fixing itself. Yep, there we go. Nope, still not working. All right, well, maybe I made a boo-boo on the Conan one. We'll fix it. So what is interesting is that, so don't go to that URL if you're watching this live. Give me a minute. But what's interesting is that Titan actually went back and perfectly reproduced all of the Marvel omnibuses, but as Conan the original year's omnibuses, mapped the same. I think everything is the same pretty much, except for the end papers are like a little fancier. And so there is some hope that they will go back and do a Conan paperback line as well once those omnibuses sell through. But I don't think they should try to actually perfectly map this epic line and match the epic line, because these were so slim that they were pointless. I would like them to see Titan do like a true epic or like a DC Finest where they're like chunky. I really want to see chunky ones from them. And so hopefully if they do that, then maybe they'll just kind of respect this break point and have them like break at 88. So if you have all of these on your shelf already, that it will collect around them. And, you know, that's possible. And that would be really cool, because Titan has been really respectful of that stuff so far. I'm just going to take a look at that Conan redirect. It's all set up correctly. If you go to Conan, it should go to guide 8032, unless I've got the wrong guide in there. Well, that's to do after the show. Yeah, the Conan guide for some reason is down. Hold on. Hold 1 moment, please. Paying a lot of money for this stuff to work. Conan is 832. There's the editable page, 832. Do we have it set up as the wrong number? No, set up as the right number. I don't know. We'll have to come back to that one later. Because that is annoying. But the actual page is down. Okay. Oh, it redirected too many times. It's stuck in a redirect loop. We're in a redirect loop. I must already have that delete rule. Okay. Problem solved. And now we're moving on. I know that was very, very exciting. Matt saying the amount of work I put into these guides is crazy in the best possible way and such an amazing tool for everyone that didn't exist before. I did them a great legacy. And here's the thing. There's so many people that are making guides like this now too. I mean, there's all these new reading order sites and some of them are really visual, which I'm just not. This is how I do visual. Visual I can speak to. I don't really like designing visuals that I can't speak to. So you're never going to see Crushing Crisis be like a really visual guide. That's just like not my jam. So I really love that there's other people out there, but I maintain that like I'm the only one that's doing it like me. I'm the only one that's like doing it with the level of intent and the level of kind of deep but wide as me. And that's not, I don't think that's me being full of myself. I just think it's the style of the guides that I do that nobody else is crazy enough to do that. Logan, is there a reason they lost the license to Conan? I forget I think the lore is that Marvel thought it wasn't worth it. Like they weren't getting enough out of it for the price or the cost, I think. Yeah. Okay, let's continue because we're only in the season. It's been a full hour. Okay, Daredevil. This is one where we truly just have one left, and not one left with like oh, this might extend to late. No, this is really just one left because Marvel is aggressively attacking this Daredevil line right now with a lot of books. There's going to be one out in December to collect more of the Frank Miller run, then another one in March to collect more of the Frank Miller run because they want to have them both out in time for the next season of the show, which means we just have this book which follows after another volume, the Frank Miller run. This is actually probably the most famous Daredevil material of all time. It's the material that has Born Again in it, and it's the only volume we're missing. Daredevil's line starts in 1964 at number 1. It ends in Daredevil 1964 380 in 1998. How do we know that? Because they've already started a modern Daredevil line. We only have volume 2 from that line, but based on where volume 2 starts at the beginning of Brian Bendis' run, we know that volume 1 will be the Kevin Smith run. So this is an open and shut case. Daredevil is just going to be like this, and we only need one more book, and it'll be a completed Silver Age line that is very, very exciting. There's really not a lot else to say, and you can see how all of that maps at crushingcrisis.com. Daredevil. So yes, the Conan Epic line was canceled. Marvel lost the license to reprint Conan, and so there will be no more Conan Epics. They got as far as they could while they had the license. That's why they've been releasing things like ROM and Micronauts so fast, because they want to do it while they still have the license. I love, by the way, that people are talking about Vampirella and the ats back and forth because I love Vampirella, and I wish that I have enough time to sit down and do a Vampirella guide. It's coming eventually when I can. Daredevil Love and War will be in volume level 11. Any reason to disagree? No, I think it should, because it's also in the Frank Miller Omnibus Companion, and it came out in 1986, which is this release frame. So yes, I would agree. I think that this will have Love and War in it. Good call. And again, I'm not perfect, nor am I trying to be or presenting myself as, and that is why I like to do this as a live stream, because you talk about me having the definitive mapping, but you all know a lot about comic books too. And between the two of us, I think that actually we know enough to make this pretty close to perfect. Now let's continue to Deadpool. Also completed, and we know this for sure. It starts with Deadpool's debut in New Mutants 98. It goes to the end of Agent X 2002, 1 through 15. That means we have 1991 to 2003. We did it in 7 volumes. We did it, Joe. They're all collected, and we've had Deadpool collected. He, at one point, was the most collected Marvel character, so it's not like, woo, this is not a big deal. We had this all in Classic Collection. We've had it all in Omnibus. It's not, we're not getting stuff for the first time, but the volume 6 was announced for January, and that will be the final one in this line. How do we know that it won't continue? Because Deadpool is next in Cable and Deadpool, which has its own modern line, and then he is after that in Deadpool 2008 by Daniel Way, which has its own modern line. So we know that there's modern lines that follow this. There's nothing else to insert. This is pretty comprehensive in collecting all of his major appearances in this period. This is going to be it for Deadpool. Yeah, and Deadpool used to be a really big seller in collections in Marvel in the 2010s, so they were really big on his omnibuses and stuff, especially when the first movie came out. I remember being on the Jersey Shore boardwalk and just seeing like Deadpool shirts even before his movie was coming out. He just was like part of the zeitgeist, and then it seems like he really fell off in the 2000s, and Marvel really backed off of releasing a lot of Deadpool collections, especially oversized hardcover collections, but the Epics apparently kept doing well, and now they've got him all out, and of course now he is an MCU star. Okay, let us continue to the Defenders. The Defenders, we need 2 volumes, and they're 2 right in the middle. So this line starts with the prelude to the formation of the Defenders that started in Doctor Strange in 183, and it ends with New Defenders 152. We already have that in Epic Collection, so we know it ends there. Or do we? Because they could, as we've established, title changes are not the end of the world for an Epic Collection, and we know that Defenders continued to Secret Defenders in 1993. So would Marvel just continue the line to collect that Secret Defenders? Well, the thing is, it has been collected in 2 trades already, so it's not like a huge priority to get there. And after Secret Defenders, the next Defenders is in 2001, and then there's another one in 2005 and another one in 2008. Here's the thing. I don't think I would put them in I don't know if I would put them in a modern collection because they kind of still feel very classic. The whole point is that Defenders is always a classic thing, and we do have some epic lines that go all the way to 2008 in a classic line. Hawkeye does. So they could extend this line not only just through Secret Defenders, but through all of those other things and collect all the way through the last Defenders in 2008 and then call the modern Defenders line a Defenders line that begins with Defenders 2012 by Matt Fraction. Or they could start the modern Defenders line with Defenders in the Order in 2001, which was a series by Eric Larson and Kurt Busiek, which would also make total sense. So they've got options here. We may not have seen the last of this line. What I do know is Defenders is a relatively low seller in collection, as the legends have it. And so I don't know how much of a hurry they're going to be creating even more Defenders. And that's the reason we've got this 2-book gap in the middle, because this is right where the Marvel Masterworks were at the time that this epic line started. That's why the epic line started with issue number 92, because it was past where the Masterworks would be. And so Marvel kind of is like, look, this has been collected already. Also, I think the next Defenders omnibus will pick up right there. Let me just check that on Crushing Krisis. It did actually in 2023. No. The next omnibus, if there was a volume 3 omnibus, it would pick up at this same issue. So these 2 books are pretty much the contents of the next omnibus. So Marvel is kind of playing a game of chicken here, where they're like, well, look, we could release these 2 books in late in 2027 and 2028, which means you're not going to get the next omnibus until 2029 or 2030. Or since you already have omnibus volume 1 and 2 from 2021 and 2023, do we do the next omnibus in 2027? So I don't know who's going to win that game of chicken. I'm really not sure, but I think that's why we are slowly dragging our feet here. Jersey Shore Boardwalk, Wildwood was my shore of choice. I grew up as poor white trash. Okay, Secret Defender crossed over with an issue of Fantastic Four as well. Would love to see Secret Defenders. And what about Laura, says Nick. And then Edjuice asking about Larson's Defenders, which I just talked about. So yeah, hard to know where this one definitively would switch over to modern. Maybe switching it over to modern would give a little bit of extra sales oomph to that 2000 stuff. And I will say that weirdly, it's not like it's important, but that Defenders run from 2001 by Larson and Busiek, that's actually one of Marvel's kind of biggest uncollected runs like left in the world. There's not a lot left that's been uncollected by Marvel, and that one we've never had in any form, or the final 6 issues, which are called The Order 2002, but they're still the final 6 issues of Defenders. We've never had it collected. So no matter what Epic Collection line it goes into, I would love to see it. Hey, Karen Charm is here, arriving at the same conclusion as me. Love that. Go Birds. fly, eagles fly. Okay, let's go on to Doctor Doom. This is one that I don't have a guide for because tackling a Doctor Doom guide is intense, and I've already done it for Loki and Kang, and it takes me like 2 years to do each villain guide. But Doctor Doom, Marvel, look, they knew, I guess they knew that he was going to be in a movie, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they just knew that Doom is Doom and that Doom, it would be popular to have a Doctor Doom epic line, and they just went for it. But in any event, here's Doctor Doom. He has his own epic collections, and these epic collections start out by 100% double dipping Fantastic Four, pretty much. But the second one redeems that a little bit because it has some of his other appearances from Submariner, from Thor. It has his material from Astonishing Tales. So as we go on, it's going to have some more Doctor Doom stuff. What I'm really interested in, I think, is the next epic, because the next epic is going to finally answer the question if supervillain team up is going to be entirely in the Doctor Doom line or the Namor line, or if they're going to give it its own epic line like Marvel team up. It's only, I think, 17 issues plus 2 giant size issues, so it could just be one epic collection. We actually, I think, have a paperback that it already exists in that I think is somewhere just below my desk here. And so they would pretty much just be redoing that paperback and calling it an epic collection. So I'm intensely interested to see if they do it just in the Doom line, because that's the next place he goes. The other thing is we just don't know where this is going to end. If you look at the Doctor Doom Book of Doom omnibus, it goes all the way to 2006 with his Book of Doom series by Ed Brubaker. 2006 is kind of late for a classic epic line, so it could stop before that, but it could just collect all the same things of the omnibus. And the great thing about this is it's actually adding, it's pretty much everything Doom. Like anytime he shows up anywhere and it's significant, this has included it so far, so it is more content from the omnibus, or else we'd be almost through the omnibus with 2 books, and we're not even close to being all the way through the omnibus. So this line has a lot of potential, and I think it would be attractive to put supervillain team up in it, because it would give it a real reason for people to buy it, who would otherwise be double dipping. But this line kind of is like a little bit of a mystery to me. Yeah, going back to Defenders, I agree. I think the return of the Defenders in the 90s, that would be a great one to put into the next volume if they do have it continue to Secret to Defenders, to kind of sweeten the pot, to be like, oh, look, here's something that we've never had comprehensively all in one place. Okay, let's see if but it does seem like they were mad they were planning a Secret Wars movie without Doom. Yeah, that is crazy talk. Spider-Woman Bubble Fun has first Doom versus Spider-Woman story also. And we can't forget Doom versus Squirrel Girl classic story in Marvel Superheroes 1990 issue number 5. Kiefer Folsom has done a mock-up of what we could get in the next 3 Doctor Dooms. I'd love to see them incorporate supervillain team up and at least get the Doom epics up to Secret Wars. Yes, very, very good. Didn't think I would like these appearance lines like the Doom epics, but it's kind of great to see characters' appearances back to back like this. Well, and it works best for a character that like has a good arc and like has major stories. It would work. They'll do Loki eventually because there's a Loki omnibus. It would be perfect for Magneto. So, yeah, I don't have a Doctor Doom guide. Well, I think he's the one actual Marvel hero in this lineup I don't have a guide for. There's some licensed properties I don't. On to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, we are tantalizingly close to completing this line, or are we? Let's talk about it. It starts in Strange Tales 110. That's been collected in Volume 1. It ends with Doctor Strange, What Is It That Disturbs You, Stephen, in 1997, collected in an existing volume as well. So we're only missing 2 volumes. They are smack in the middle of this. They're Volume 6 and 7. I think part of the reason they've avoided them is because the Marvel Masterworks were kind of collecting through the same period at the same time, so they tried to stay away from that. They would collect Doctor Strange 52 through 81, which includes some of Roger Stern's run, and then the transition to him sharing a book, Strange Tales 1 through 19 with Cloak and Dagger, but the Cloak and Dagger half of that would not be in the epics, only the, because they didn't cross over into the same story. They were 2 separate serials in the book, as well as probably Marvel's graphic novel Into Shambhala, which I do not think has been collected in epic yet. So here's the thing. I was looking at my Doctor Strange guide and I was thinking, does this really need to end in 1997, and would it transition to modern epics after that? And I am not 100% sure. So there's a comic called The Flight of Bones in 1999, which is the next Doctor Strange book, and that had its own very slim trade paperback at one point, so it has been collected along with some other stuff in that period, Mystic Hands of Doctor Strange and material from Marvel's Shadows and Light. That all is happening right around the same time as What Is It Disturbs You, Stephen? I think it's kind of really weird that they didn't map the Epic Collection line so that would fit into it. Like, it really seems like it should be in the Epic Collection line. So let's say that we did continue the Epic Collection line, and we continue to that. That Flight of Bones book is only 192 pages. So then it becomes a question of what else could we collect? Well, there's a mini-series called Witches in 2004. That's 4 issues. So that's like another 80 pages. So now we're up to like 200 pages. Then there's Strange 2004, which is a retelling of his origins. That's a Marvel Knights series though. But again, we have seen some things stretch that far. So that gets us a little bit farther. And then there's Doctor Strange The Oath in 2006. That's another 5 issues. So now we're like really cooking. And finally, there's Strange 2010 1-4 by Mark Waid and Emma Rios. So if you take all of that together, that's pretty much everything he does before he gets his Jason Aaron book in 2015, other than be a member of the Avengers and part of Brian Bendis's Avengers Illuminati. So that's a volume. Whether that's going to be a volume, let's see, what would it be? Whether that is a volume 14 in this line, it could all fit into one. It would take us all the way through 2010. That would make it the classic line that's gone the farthest into time. Or if that's modern epic volume 1, I don't know. Axel Plate asking, what about Secret Defenders? Marvel doesn't really have the convention of collecting a team book in a solo line just because the solo hero starred in the team book. So there are some Secret Defenders issues that are important to Doctor Strange, and he is the lead character for the first half of it, but I don't think they would collect that all in his epic collections. And also that kite is already flown. That was happening during his epic collections, like volume, 10, 11, and 12. And so we've already missed the chance to have them. Epic collections, they would be their own epic line. Okay, Flight of Bones was a Marvel Knights title. Okay, so Dr. Zero has landed on it. That's probably going to mean that all that stuff I just talked about would be the first Doctor Strange modern epic line. Okay, let's continue to Excalibur, which is only missing 1 volume. So this technically starts with Excalibur Special Edition in 1987, an amazing, beautiful OGN, one of my favorite issues of all time. But just to give you a little bit of context, they threw in the first 2 issues of Captain Britain from 1976. I don't think we could say this line starts in 1976. They were kind of just there as an extra. And Marvel has really quickly moved through Excalibur. I think Excalibur must just be a great seller, which makes sense because a lot of people, me included, really, really love Excalibur and had loved it for a long time. So we have everything Excalibur. Not only do we have it all collected in omnibus, but we're only 1 epic collection away from having it entirely in epic collection 2. It is the back half, really the majority of Warren Ellis's run. I think he writes a few issues before that, right? And that's all that we need. And clearly, it's well collected already. You could just grab the omnibuses, but if you want it all on yourself, we just need 1 more. And because we have the maps from the omnibuses, we know exactly what this will collect. And let me just, now I'm curious to know, yeah, he had already written the Soul Sword stuff that comes before this. So Ellis had already been on the title before the switch to this. And that's it. So then we'll have everything Excalibur all in, I think is it 8 volumes? I'm probably going to put the total number of volumes, 9 volumes on these slides. From 1987 to, and it's not to 2004, it's to 2001. I don't know why I put 2004, but that is a lie. Okay, let's continue. To Fantastic Four. And this one is one that I have a bone to pick. And I'm sorry, this is just a hyperfixation for me. You're going to have to live with it. So this starts with Fantastic Four, 1961, number 1, the beginning of Marvel's Silver Age. It ends with something we don't know yet because we don't have a modern Fantastic Four epic line to chart back to where it's going to start. So it could just end at the end of the Heroes Reborn series. But we haven't seen any of the other Heroes Reborn books do that. All of them have continued into their 1998 series in the classic line. So it could end with Fantastic Four 1998-34, which is where Claremont and LaRocca are both done their runs. However, the run after that is not really major enough to call it a volume 1 of the next thing. So it could end with issue 59. That's where I think it's going to end, because then after that with issue 60 starts Mark Waid's and Mike Wieringo's run, which is a pretty major, pretty widely beloved run. It feels suitable for a volume 1, or technically you could start the modern ones after the Waid run ends at 524 is the last issue of that. I think that's crazy talk. I really think the moderns are going to start with Waid with issue 60, which means we have at least another 4 epics to go. So let's talk about it. We're missing epics 14 through 16. Why such a big chunk? This is the biggest chunk we've seen missing from anything, right? Because it's all John Byrne, and Marvel was getting through that in Masterworks. And there's John Byrne omnibuses, which they have reprinted. So they've always stayed away from that stuff in epics while they have collected it in other formats. But then we have everything all the way up until they take their break to go to Heroes Reborn. And actually, do we have Heroes Reborn yet? Let me look at my guide. We do. We are getting it actually in a couple of months, the Heroes Reborn stuff from 1996. So that's the only stuff we're missing, that burn material, except prepare for my rant. So when Marvel started Fantastic Four and Fantastic Four Epics, they started pretty early on in the Epics with the Tom DeFalco material, and that started in 2014. Actually, they started with the Walt Simonson material first, and then they made their way through the DeFalco material. But the point being, they had plenty of time to get this right in their mapping, but they skipped two things that in other lines they would include. One of those things is Fantastic Four Unlimited. It was a quarterly mega big book starring not just the Fantastic Four, but their supporting characters like Namor, Ant-Man, the Inhumans, and it ran for 12 issues, and they're all giant-sized issues just like X-Men Unlimited. The X-Men line has all of X-Men Unlimited. Why doesn't the Fantastic Four line have all of Fantastic Four Unlimited? It ran along their series. It's only 13 issues. Why would you not map it that way? That's crazy talk. It's Fantastic Four in the title. But wait, I'm not done, because there's two more problems. So the next problem is that there was this dollar book called Fantastic Four Unplugged. It only had 6 issues, but it's never been collected, and it also fits into this pre-Onslaught period of Fantastic Four, and it's not in the Epic line. And they didn't do Avengers Unplugged and the Avengers Epic line either, which vexes me to no end. But it pisses me off here. Now, there's also Fantastic Force, which was like a side series that ran for 18 issues. Only 2 issues of that are collected in this line because they directly cross over. But Fantastic Four is not like X-Men, where there's 1,000 spin-off books. It's just Fantastic Four and Thing, generally, except for Human Torch back in Strange Tales. So, like, to me, especially because that whole Fantastic Four's team kind of weaves back into Fantastic Four at the end, and they all appear in Fantastic Four, and then Onslaught happens, it's just 18 issues. Like, I personally would have mapped it in. I mean, maybe just would have put it at the end of each epic in 3 chunks. So, we're left with, basically, we need a Fantastic Four epic companion. First of all, it's egregious that they didn't include Unlimited. All of the other lines, they planned for that. The Spider-Man line is Spider-Man Unlimited. The Midnight Suns line is breaking up its Midnight Suns Unlimited into Ghost Rider, into Blade, all of the places it ought to be. It's crazy that Fantastic Four, I understand some of the stories are not about the core Fantastic Four, but there's not even a hint, not even a whisper of collecting in the Epic line. It just makes me angry, because it's really one of the true misses of the Epic collections, along with that Black Widow material we talked about earlier. And unlike that, which is like, you could make the argument that that's all double dips, and so that's why it got its own little slim book. This is not double dips. This is Fantastic Four material. But maybe that means we get a companion book that has just Unlimited Unplugged. Fantastic Four Unlimited Unplugged, right? So maybe it's not 23.5, but I hope they do it at some point, because it's egregious that we missed it. And now they have to market it as its own weird ball thing instead of just including it in the Epic line. Axel Plate asking if they've ever collected Dominion Day, or isn't it? Are you thinking of Domination Factor? But I know what you mean. That it was an Avengers and Fantastic Four miniseries that trades back and forth. I don't think it has ever been collected. Ooh. And that would all go into volume 27 plus. So that would be everything in the 1998 series. And they did have a number of one-shots, miniseries, supporting books in that. So it's not just a straight sprint of 1 through 59. There's a lot of other stuff in there too. So you might be looking at that and going, oh, that's like 2 Epic collections, 3 at best. Or, I mean, 3, 4 at best. I don't know. Not that many, right? 60 issues. But no, there's actually a lot of other material. And you can see the complete Fantastic Four reading order if you go to crushingcrisis.com/F4 or FF. Or you could even spell out Fantastic Four. I think I made redirects for all of them. And it is one of my oldest ones. And it's very, very complete. And you can find all of this in there. Let's see. I haven't really looked at what you were saying much here. It would make sense to start Modern Epic FF with Mark Waid. I agree. Everybody, I don't rant that much because I keep picking positive subjects that I love a lot. And so you don't hear me screaming as much as you did in the poll list. But this is something that I am truly, truly obsessed and angry about. And rants are fun. The days of rants. The days of Elijah. And by the way, that Elijah plot, like, resolves at the end of Onslaught. I just read Fantastic Four 416, which is the final issue of this run, in my house read with Kid Krisis. So like, I'm like, gosh darn it. Are any of those missing FF issues included in any other collection? Nope. Never been collected. Never, never. It was just poor. I think, honestly, here's what I think, Logan. Not Logan. I can see the flames on the side of my face. Here's what I think, Derek. I think Fantastic Four was one of the first Epic Collection lines they mapped as a proof of concept, because it's Fantastic Four, it's Marvel's first family. Even though they didn't have the film rights at that time, I think they knew they were going to collect it. I think this and Iron Man. And I think that you can see in Fantastic Four that there's just a few places where they back themselves into a corner a little bit. And that's one of those places. You can see it in the Avengers line once or twice. They had to start somewhere, and more power to them. They didn't know how long running or how popular this line would be. I'm sure if they had the chance to do it again, there's some things they would change the mapping of. Unfortunately for things like X-Men, they just were smart enough, fortunately for X-Men, unfortunately for Fantastic Four, they were wise enough to kind of hold their horses on getting into 90s X-Men, and they waited long enough to have a really good idea of how they wanted to do it. Whereas with Fantastic Four, they kind of like jumped in with both feet, and they're like, oh, it's not that complicated. And so now it's kind of like, what's done is done. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 comes out at the same period as some of that Marvel Knights stuff. And there's also Marvel Knights Fantastic Four. So that's like another weird edge case. Like, would you put all of Marvel Knights Fantastic Four in the classic line? It feels like that should go in a modern line, but I think some of it is happening at the same time as this classic line. So it's kind of like, yeah, a little confusing. Let's see. Where does Marvel Knights start? No. Yeah, Marvel Knights doesn't start until the middle of Wade. So that's not a conflict, but 1, 2, 3, 4 happens earlier than that. Sorry, when I get like lost in thought here, I know I don't always bring you along with me. So let me just show Crushing Krisis so we can explore this. So here we are in Fantastic Four 1998. Here's how it's been collected in Omnibus. It hasn't up until Wade. Here's how it was collected in 2, 3 complete collections, 4 complete collections, all the way through 59. And then, of course, Wade starts after that. And here it is in reading order by single issue or storyline. So if we look for this 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a Grant Morrison Fantastic Four series, in reading order, it comes between 39 and 40. And so that would be a part of kind of this next gap of stuff, taking us all the way to the beginning of the Wade material. So you could push it into modern epic only because it's not incredibly important to read in reading order. It's not acknowledged by the main book, and it's Marvel Knights. So if you wanted to start a modern epic with Marvel Knights, but I guess we haven't really seen how any series is going to handle if their book had a Marvel Knights book alongside their main book. For Spider-Man, it was always the Amazing Spider-Man line, so it was never going to collect all of Marvel Knights. So that means we would need a separate epic collection for Spider-Man Marvel Knights. The modern epics are a mess. They're not as simple as the classic epics, and that's why I decided not to get into that here. I don't think Marvel does not have the convention of fixing things on reprint the way that DC does, which technically is not a reprint, it's a new edition if they change things. I think people would riot. The only way it would work is if they just expanded each book to have some more issues in it, but they still had the same breakpoints. So it was like, hey, this is the exact same breakpoint as the old book, plus 4 unlimited issues. But we've just never seen Marvel do that. Fantastic Four 2099 would just have its own run. Like, there's no reason that would ever be included in the Fantastic Four line, I don't think. Okay, Generation X, this is completed. And we know it's completed because there's no more Generation X to do. It starts with the core of Flank's Covenant from Uncanny X-Men 316 to 318, and Uncanny X-Men 36 and 37. Then it picks up with Generation X number 1 in 1994. It collects all the way through the end of Generation X 1994. And then also, much to my surprise and delight, the final volume, which was just announced, is going to also collect the never before collected Chamber miniseries from 2002, which is not only cool to get in Epic Collection, but it kind of answers our question for omnibus mapping, if it would ever need to be collected in some kind of X-Men omnibus, even though it happens after Generation X is over. No, this is a clear signal that it is going to be in the Generation X line. So it is a dream to have this completely collected. This was a severely undercollected book. Previous to this, it had one classic collection that didn't even collect all of everything that was in the first volume. So it is so cool to finally have it. It's 6 volumes. I own them all. I love this run. And it's just great to see Marvel finish things. And they completed this on a pretty steady clip. They collected it exactly sequentially, and they did one a year from 2021 to 2026. And now we are done. Are we going to get a cable epic? Interesting question. I will very briefly talk about missing epics at the end. Now let's go to Ghost Rider. And this is one where Marvel actually made 2 lines of the same title. The only time they've done that in the classic line. Because 2 different Ghost Riders. But I don't think that was necessary. I think, again, as time went on, as the years wore on, they got a little bit nervous about higher epic volume numbers, and they were like, ooh, it would be nice to start the line again. So this first Ghost Rider is Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider, and this is the classic Ghost Rider. It starts in 1971, technically with his first appearances, but it's really 1972 to 1983. And we only, I think, need 1 more volume that would collect the very end of his series from gosh, I have the year 3 different ways on the same page. No, I don't. No, it's right, actually. And that would collect to issue number 81. There's really no other Johnny Blaze to collect past that. You just collect 1 issue of Defenders, and then there's an archival story from Marvel Superheroes in 1990, but it was written to fit much earlier, just like the Miss Marvel stories in Marvel Superheroes. So it's not like this line like really continues through 1990. So we just need 1 more book. I mean, that's great. It's awesome. I love that this is going to be collected. This was a huge gap in Marvel's collections outside of Black and White Epic Collection for so long. They have almost kept a 1-a-year pace. They didn't do a 2023 volume of this, but they did. But that's because they launched the Danny Ketch line in 2023. So we had 2022, 24, 25, 26. So I do think late in 2027, we should get this volume, and this line will be over because the next Ghost Rider there is this Ghost Rider, which did map on 1 line in my presentation. Oh, this is so annoying. So this is Ghost Rider Danny Ketch. It starts fresh with Danny Ketch taking over in 1990. He's a newly introduced character taking over the Legacy title, and honestly, probably one of the most successful Legacy heroes of all time. Because he's much like Flash, where some people's Flash is Wally and some people's Flash is Barry, and it's almost 50-50. I feel like the same thing for Ghost Rider, except for I think more people's Ghost Rider is Danny Ketch than it is Johnny Blaze. So here's what's interesting about this, and Marvel did this very deliberately, because you have to think this is a relatively new line. Marvel put out the first volume, but then they hopscotched over several volumes to put out a volume 6 that has all of the Siege of Darkness crossover in it. And the reason they did that is because they knew they were going to be active in this omnibus line, and so they basically left a gap for them to catch up in omnibus to there, and then they could backtrack and start putting in epic collections. Very, very clever. I like when they're smart about their release strategy. So they are putting out a volume 2 later this year in December, and that will collect a big chunk of what's in. In fact, I think it gets us to the end of the first omnibus. Let me just take a look at Crushing Krisis to confirm that. CrushingKrisis.com/Ghost Rider. Now's the quick way to get to that guide. Let's see what goes on in that omnibus. Yeah, the first omnibus goes to issue number 24, which is where Epic Volume 2 will go. So then we need Epic Volume 3 through 5, and Epics 3 through 5 is going to collect actually just slightly past the end of Omnibus Volume 2. Now, the epics have already set the standard, maybe in the 3rd epic or in the 6th epic, that it's also going to pick up the Ghost Rider Blaze Spirits of Vengeance book as well. The reason I say we don't know that for absolute sure is that book is picking it up just by virtue of it being part of Siege of Darkness. We've not yet seen if it's going to collect all of that book in Epic Collection, because but the omnibuses have, and this does seem like it's pretty similarly mapped to the omnibuses. So these 3 books that we need to get through are all pretty big books, and then after Siege of Darkness, this line gets much simpler. There stops being crossovers, there stop being other appearances. It's pretty much a straight shot. The only remaining question that's left at that point is the question of, is this really going to end with the end of the 1990 series, which has issue 94, which was released as Ghost Rider Finale, actually much later, but it's the finale of the 1990 series? Or would this maybe just extend to Ghost Rider 2001, which is also known as Ghost Rider The Hammerlane? Because that is still, it is a Marvel Knights title, but there's a pretty big gap between that and the next book, which is Ghost Rider 2005, also known as The Road to Damnation. So it could make sense to grab that 2001 book, even though it's Marvel Knights, just because it's kind of like still so far away from the other stuff. But because it's Marvel Knights, it also might be a good reason to just end the line there. So for now, I'm saying that this would probably end in 1998. Superjob joking that my Ghost Rider is Carter Slade, which is the Ghost Rider who rode a pale horse through the night, and he doesn't even have enough material for one epic collection. But since they've already established the convention of putting a subtitle name in the Ghost Rider line, they could just do a one-off Ghost Rider Carter Slade and collect it finally in one place. Okay. And Nick Sang thinks Hammerlane should be modern. Here's another one that's not entirely clear. It's Guardians of the Galaxy. What's really cool about this, and I'm happy they did it because I wasn't sure that they would, is they did 2 collections that collect all the classic Guardians of the Galaxy that are like the classic team that was called Guardians of the Galaxy that just made appearances in Marvel books. What this epic collection is not is a collection of all the solo adventures of the existing modern Guardians of the Galaxy. It's only ever collecting things that were at the time calling themselves Guardians of the Galaxy, if that makes any sense at all. And so after it collects all those classic stories, it then immediately hops to Guardians of the Galaxy 1990 and starts collecting that in the volumes that are already out. So there's 3 volumes out. It takes us all the way through to 20 of that series. We've had that whole series in paperback before, so it is possible. I have it down in the stacks. So this would just be recollecting all of that. And we already know exactly how it's mapped because it would just be recollecting that. It probably could be done in just 2 more epics, I think. There's no reason to drag it out. It's not the most popular material because it's not the movie Guardians. A lot of people will be like, wait, why end in 95? You could then start collecting all of Rocket and blah, blah, blah. But at that time, they weren't the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think that would be like a separate line because we've already moved past a lot of that material in this line and it's not collected here because at the time they were not the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I don't think that material would ever be in this line. I don't really know what line it could be in, but it's not going to be in this one and we probably only need 1 more, but I'm not that hot for it because again, there were existing paperbacks and I got them. You can go to crushingcrisis.com, GOTG, Guardians of the Galaxy, GOTG, to see that guide, which is a public guide. It's arranged in a very kind of interesting way because I do have it cover everybody who's ever been a Guardian or will be a Guardian in reading order. So it's not just Guardians of the Galaxy titles. It's like Rocket, it's Groot, it's Star-Lord, it's Gamora, it's everybody that would be. But again, they are not in this Guardians line. Guardians 3000, if you mean the Guardians in the future, they are in this line. That is what the 1990 book is. Guardians 3000 is the paperbacks that continued that, and they will absolutely be in this line. Like, no question in my mind whatsoever, it's in this line. It's called Guardians of the Galaxy. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. And we can move on to Hawkeye, which is completed. Bow, bow, bow. It starts with his debut in Tales of Suspense. It goes all the way into 2008. So this is the kind of line that lets me say we could go into the 2000s and these classics lines because this one did. I personally would have switched it to a modern line at the point that we're telling stories in Hawkeye that are alongside New Avengers, which is a modern line, but what are you going to do? Marvel does what it's going to do. So in 4 books, we've collected everything Hawkeye. Not only everything Hawkeye, this line did a very cool thing, and it's something that I'm glad that Marvel sometimes does think ahead. It collected every issue, every story of every issue of Avengers Spotlight and and Solo Avengers. Hawkeye was the anchor character in that title, and they could have very easily only collected the Hawkeye stories, but they didn't. They collected all of the stories, no matter what character starred in them. That's entirely contained in this line, and it's just so cool to have. It's so cool to see it finally collected in color, and this is it. There's nothing else to do. The next solo Hawkeye after this would be Matt Fraction Hawkeye, which would be a modern book. Now we come to Incredible Hulk, which is the line, I think, with the most gaps other than Fantastic Four and Amazing Spider-Man. So this starts with Incredible Hulk in 1962. Where does it end? Question marks. Let's talk about the gaps first, shall we? So we have 2 gaps that are missing volumes in the middle of Peter David's run, volume 17 and 18. It makes sense because Marvel had those omnibuses out. They got reprinted several times. Marvel didn't want to compete with it, but now they already have it restored. They've already got it mapped. There's no reason they won't continue to put them out soon. And in fact, I think they just announced the one that goes right before that, I want to say. Yeah, Joe Fix It, which is going to be volume number 16, which is going to be coming out in January. of 2027. So they're going to keep moving through that pad material. They know it's a hot seller, and they'll put it out in Epic so that all the people who missed the omnibuses will get it in Epic. Then outside of Peter David's run, we're only missing one volume of Hulk, and we know it exactly what's going to go in it because an omnibus has already mapped through it. And that's volume number 23, and that's actually late in the Peter David run. So it's more Peter David, and I'm sure we will get to it. The question then becomes, where does this switch to modern epic? And this is, I think, the trickiest one because we have the numbers already, but it's hard to figure out exactly how they're going to add up because we already have a modern epic for Hulk. It is the beginning of the Hulk 2008 Adjectiveless Hulk run by Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness. And we know that that is modern epic volume 6. Who is the Red Hulk? Which means we have 5 modern epic volumes before that. So if you start counting backwards from where that line starts, you can try to figure out how far back does 5 modern epics get us. Now, there are about 111 issues of Hulk before that because that's when the Incredible Hulk transitions to the Incredible Hercules. So 5 epic collections should be plenty for 111 issues, right? Well, maybe, because that also includes the World War Hulk event, which is going to pad out some additional issues. And there's a lot of miniseries in that period as well, including Hulk, the Thing, Hard Knocks, Hulk Wolverine, 6 Hours, Startling Stories Banner. There's Hulk Night America. So it's not really just 111 issues, especially if this would collect all of World War Hulk, and we don't know that it would. But I think even if it doesn't collect all of the tie-ins, if we're just looking at all those miniseries, we're closer to over 130 issues. Now it's getting to be possibly more than 5 volumes could contain, which leads us to the question, maybe, much like the Amazing Spider-Man line, we're actually going to go 1 or 2 more volumes into that 1999 relaunch. And that makes a lot of sense to me because a lot of people have already started saying in the chat, Bruce Jones. Bruce Jones, I think a lot of people would say, is kind of the start of modern Hulk. And Bruce Jones, I want to say, starts at Hulk number 34. And so that would clearly make it much more possible to get all of the stuff that we don't have yet into those 5 volumes that we want. Now that I'm not 100% sure of that. It's not a complete lock. I'm not saying that I'm totally right, but I think especially because John Byrne is the creator at the beginning of that 1999 run of Hulk, it just feels like he fits into the classic format. And we've also seen that already collected in an omnibus that's really similar to the pad omnibuses. So it feels like at least they would want to do the John Byrne stuff in a Hulk omnibus. And at that point, we're like, what, 11 issues deep into it? So it's kind of like, oh, well, we might as well just collect all the way, you know, to the Bruce Jones material. So sorry if that was hard to follow. It's actually hard for me to kind of describe because there's just so much stuff going on with Hulk in that point. But the real question is, how far are we going to go into the 1999 Hulk series? It starts out being called Hulk 1999. It changes to Incredible Hulk with issue number 12, sometimes credited as Incredible Hulk 1999, sometimes credited as Incredible Hulk 2000. So, oh my gosh, I'm so turned around from talking about that. But that is the question. So yeah, we will see. So Mr. Albator is counting backwards, World War Hulk Volume 5, Planet Hulk Volume 4. So yeah, we might be able to get all the way to the beginning. I didn't want to get into like making this an exact book for book mapping show because that's just not what I was trying to achieve. But this one is one of the most interesting ones. Okay. Now we are on to Iron Fist. So Iron Fist is another one where if I can find him on my shelf here, there is a companion book that is not an epic, but you should still get it if you can find it because that's stuff that's not going to be in the epic collection. And that's because it's all of the black and white material that he had in Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And his epic collection runs exactly alongside that. And it's a pretty thick epic collection. So rather than splitting it into 2, they just released this as a totally separate book, much like that Black Widow book. So this is kind of like Epic 1.5, and you need it if you want a complete paperback Iron Fist shelf. Now, a lot of people are under the mistaken assumption that just because this Iron Fist collects all the way up to the beginning of Power Man and Iron Fist, that we don't need another Iron Fist Epic Collection. And in fact, we do need another Iron Fist Epic Collection because both Iron Fist and Luke Cage come back with 1990s series. In the case of Iron Fist, I would actually put some stuff from Namor the Submariner by John Byrne in there because that's where Iron Fist returns. But then he has a number of his own series. They have been very well collected. He had his own paperbacks that collected that previously, kind of before Marvel had the full scope of the Epic Collection line figured out. So it's kind of mapped perfectly. And there were, I think they were like almost Epic sized paperbacks. Let's see. So it kind of makes perfect sense that we would just keep collecting through them. They collect things like Iron Fist sorry, got a little turn around there. They collect things like Iron Fist, The Return of Kunlun, Iron Fist 1996, all the way up through his 2004 material. And that book is 400 pages. So if we just tacked a little bit of the Submariner stuff onto it as a sweetener at the beginning, that would be a perfect Iron Fist Volume 2. So we might not even need Volumes 2+. We might just need Volume 2. So that would be perfect. And I actually really like a lot of that 90s material. It's pretty dopey 90s stuff, but I still really enjoy it. Saturday Morning Fan points out there's also the Heroes for Hire 90s series, which is from 1997 to 1999. That stars both Iron Fist and Luke Cage. So where would it be collected? We'll come back to that a little bit later. At the point we get Iron Fist all the way to 2004, there's an obvious break where the next Iron Fist series is the Ed Brubaker Iron Fist series with Mad Fraction, the Immortal Iron Fist. That's obviously modern, so that's where we would make the switch to modern. I don't think it would make sense to make the switch to modern in the 90s, and none of that early 2000s material feels like modern Marvel 90s material. It feels like more 90s comic books to me. Now we're on to Iron Man, the Golden Avenger, who was the first Epic Collection ever, and we are just missing one more Epic Collection, and Marvel should have been putting it out in March of 2027. Instead, they're fucking morons. Let's talk about it. This gap, this final gap in the Iron Man Epic Collections to get us all the way to like the post Heroes Reborn Epic Collections, is the material that's in the Michelini and Layton Omnibus. They put out Volume 8, Demon in a Bottle, this September, which is the first half of that material. So we just need the second half of that material. But what are they doing instead of putting out that Epic Collection? Because Marvel's run by a bunch of incompetent monkeys sometimes. They're instead reprinting the Michelini, Layton, and John Romita Jr. Omnibus in the middle of putting it out in Epic Collection. Now, we've been told that omnibuses and Epic Collections sometimes have different audiences, and they're not always the same people, and, you know, that you can release an omnibus and an Epic right next to each other. DC does it with omnibuses and Finest all the time, but I'm just saying, at the point that the only remaining gap in your Iron Man Epic line is the exact material that's in this omnibus that nobody asked to have reprinted, and is the exact same material that's in the next Marvel Masterworks omnibus that you have to put out in 2 years anyway. Why would you put out that omnibus when you could just put out this missing Epic Collection? I just don't know what to say. It's this whole Iron Man situation is the dumbest collection move Marvel has made in, I think, so far this decade. I mean, they've had a couple of goofs. They've had a couple of double dips. They've had a couple of Marvel mapping misses. But this situation is the stupidest thing they have done in the 2020s. Because the right order to do it in was to put the 3 extra issues that would be in the next Marvel Masterworks based omnibus in the Volume 4 omnibus, which that ship already sailed because it came out a few months ago. Then to put out these 2 Epic collections, because there's always a long break between Iron Man omnibuses anyway. And then to rename the Michelini, Layton, and Romita Jr. omnibus as Classic Omnibus Volume 5, because other than those 3 issues that are now going to be stuck in the Volume 5 omnibus, it's the same exact material, issue for issue. Instead, they've done it in the completely wrong order, which is they didn't make the Volume 4 Omnibus run all the way up to a clean break with that or with the Epic Collection. Then they put out one of the Epic Collections. Now they're going to do a reprint of the Omnibus. Then they're going to put out the other Epic Collection. Then it's too dumb for words. Too dumb for words. Also, we know that the Iron Man line will continue because we know, unlike the Hulk line where there's like being on volume 6 kind of makes it a little murky what's going to get mapped before that. We know exactly what's going to get mapped into the Iron Man modern line. It's going to start from Extremis by Warren Ellis. So we know that we have to get through all of the Iron Man material from his 1998 series. Actually, we've never had that all collected. I think there was one, I want to say that there's one complete collection or like paperback that got canceled. So it'll be cool. And actually that's really fun material. It's got Joe Quesada art. It's got writing by Mike Grell. It's got a little Sean Chen is in it. Like it's got a lot of really fun pedigree that's been in omnibus before. I think it'll sell perfectly fine in Epic Collection. And I really hope that they don't wait forever to release volume 9. I hope they just knock out volume 9 later in 2027 or early in 2028. And then we just deal with the 1998 series. And I think, again, you're seeing that trend in Avengers and Fantastic Four. We're seeing them cap off the classic line and then move into the, but still in the classic line, move into the 1998 material. And just don't make us wait for volume 9. That would be absurd. That would be absurd. Okay. Kill Raven. It's a one and done, baby. If you got it in your shelf, you got everything Kill Raven that will ever kill your friggin' Raven. Here it is. Kill Raven. What's funny is I think there was one more thing they could have put into that, which is like a modern series, but it's in a different continuity. So maybe it was like a rights issue. Also, this is on the chunkier side. It's, I don't know, actually it's only about 500 pages. They probably could have fit it in. But anyway, this is all one book. It's technically, I think, a possible future of the Marvel universe, but it has nothing to do with Marvel. There's no Marvel characters in it. It's kind of like a War of the Worlds story. So if you're into like hard sci-fi, it's kind of cool. It's very well regarded. It's like a classic Marvel sci-fi tale that a lot of people love. And so we were all very surprised when they announced it for Epic, but it was cool to be able to do it in a one and done. And it's weird because it almost feels more like a licensed property, but it is a Marvel property. And so it almost feels more like reading like Planet of the Apes or something like that. So, okay. And he did technically show up in Avengers Forever. So technically he is part of Marvel continuity. Luke Cage, another one that people mistakenly think is over because it meets up with the Power Man and Iron Fist series, but there's more Luke Cage. So right now we have 2 volumes that collect all of the classic 70s blaxploitation Luke Cage, who, you know, was in prison and then is a hero for hire, etc., etc. Then we have all of the Power Man and Iron Fist epics, which we will get to shortly in alphabetical order. But he comes back for a series called Cage, 1992. It has been collected previously in paperback, but we would need another collection. Would we need 2 volumes? I don't know. It's only 20 issues, but it does have a number of crossovers with it, and that might push it just out of Epic range. Personally, I would try to find a way to get it out in one Epic. And then there's really not anything else Luke Cage other than Heroes for Hire in 1997, which we'll talk about in a second when we get to Power Man and Iron Fist. So unless you put that here, this line would be done. And he really doesn't have any modern material. He only has a Max series, which I believe is in continuity, and then a 2010 miniseries. Otherwise, he's pretty much just in New Avengers and in Alias. So this is it for a Luke Cage line. We wouldn't even need a modern Luke Cage line. It would probably not even start until the 2010s. So we just need this, what could be one more volume. Yeah, Dwayne Turner was the artist on that. And Kill Raven is indeed based on War of the Worlds. Okay, Marvel 2-in-1. This, again, that does not really break onto 2 lines. I don't know why Google is slandering me and libeling me like that. Or actually, it's StreamYard. Google knows it's right. Google knows I did it right. But anyway, I'll try not to get upset about it every single time we see it happen. Okay, because I spent so long on this presentation. Anyway, what is Marvel 2-in-1? It's the Thing. It's Thing team up. Thing is almost always the anchor character, I think in all but like 1 or 2 issues of Marvel 2-in-1. And it actually starts with Marvel Feature 1971, which starts the story, and then it rolls into Marvel 2-in-1 1974 number 1. It's a perfect 100 issue series. And Marvel imperfectly, because they're a bunch of dinglings, ended the Marvel Masterworks line before we could get the final edition of this out. That's how I feel about that. But we only need a little bit more in Epic to get there, so maybe it's not so bad. There's only 27, 28 issues left in Epic. That could maybe be one Epic. And there's nothing to collect after that, because next, after this, The Thing gets his own title, which we've had in Omnibus. But I think they'll just replace this Epic line with The Thing Epic line. So we just need 1, maybe 2, but I really think just 1 more volume of this, and then this line will be over, and then we'll be on to The Thing. Next is Master of Kung Fu. Is this truly canceled? So as the lore has it, Marvel licensed the ability to reprint their classic Shang-Chi comics. And by the way, this is a Shang-Chi line. It's called Master of Kung Fu, but it's the Shang-Chi Epic Collection. And in 2018, they licensed the ability to reprint those comics from the Sax-Rohmer estate, because Sax-Rohmer holds the rights to Fu Manchu, who canonically was Shang-Chi's father and did appear in Shang-Chi comic books. So in order, even though they could probably pick and choose and get some of the Master of Kung Fu issues reprinted without Fu Manchu, to reprint all of it, you need to be able to have Fu Manchu in it. But even though Marvel got all of the omnibuses out all in one go while they had the license live, they did not manage to get all of the Epic collections out. Only 2. They weren't quick enough. So again, they learned a lesson, which we've seen improved in the world of ROM and Micronauts. So is this line truly forever canceled, just like the Conan line? I don't think so. I don't think so. Because Marvel's going to want to reprint that stuff again, and they will license it again, because now Shang-Chi's had a movie. When they put out another Shang-Chi movie, they're gonna want to reprint stuff. I don't know. I mean, a second Shang-Chi movie is definitely going to be much more like modern Shang-Chi, and so they have all of that they could put in omnibus. But there will be a day that Marvel licenses it again. I know. I just know they will. I know they will. This is not a one-time thing. I'm sure once 10 years go by, in 2028 or 2029, they'll license it again. It's the Disney way of doing things, right? I just think they will. Here's what's interesting. We don't need to license that to put out another Shang-Chi Epic Collection, but maybe we don't call it a Master of Kung Fu Epic Collection. Maybe we call it a Shang-Chi Epic Collection, because Shang-Chi does make a number of appearances in the 1990s that have nothing to do with Fu Manchu and don't reference him. Some of them were in the final Master of Kung Fu Omnibus, but there's no licensing problem with them that I am aware of. I just went through those issues myself again. And there's enough of them for one pretty thick epic to take us all the way to when he starts appearing in Marvel Knights, which I would call modern. So you could sneak that epic out, or you could call it Shang-Chi Epic Volume 1. I don't know what you do, but like, there's solo material and significant guest appearances material, and it would be a fun way to keep this epic collection line alive until Marvel gets the news of if they're ever going to license it again. So that's why I listed them separately. I think they should just do it, especially since he's going to be in these upcoming Avengers movies. I would just put out that 90s stuff, which has been collected, some of it in trade, but some of it was only ever in that 4th omnibus. I would just put it out as an epic collection. That is perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay. Wiccan never got the chance to get it originally. Is this the color Shang-Chi comics? That's a good point. So much like Iron Fist, this epic line committed only to collecting the color Shang-Chi stories from Master of Kung Fu. It did not collect the stories from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. So if Marvel should get the license back, I would expect that we would get a paperback like this Iron Fist paperback that has just the black and white Shang-Chi stories from Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. He's not all of the stories. Obviously, there were Iron Fist stories too. There's some Misty Knight and Colleen Wing stories in there. So I think one paperback would handle that, but obviously it would be sort of an epic companion and not in the actual epic line. Now we come to one of Marvel's licensed properties, but they were licensed and also existed in the Marvel Universe. It's the Micronauts. They start in 1979. They run to 1986 and across 2 different series. And Marvel got these epic collections out in a big hurry. They put them out, 3 of them in 2025 and 2 of them for this year, including one that just came out a month ago. I think it just got here in the box that I got on Friday, right before the weekend. And now we have the complete run of the Micronauts, except for reasons unbeknownst to the world, Marvel decided not to reprint their one big moneymaker, Micronauts and X-Men, in any of these books. Maybe it was a licensing issue and they couldn't put the X-Men in the Micronauts line, or more accurately, people assumed that Hasbro might have had or whoever owns Micronauts, I forget now, might have had a problem with the fact that it's got a sort of like grooming-y, weird plot line with Professor Xavier in it, if memory serves. But Marvel could always just put it out as its own paperback, maybe. But the Micronauts license is not theirs anymore. That's why they rushed through these. So we may truly never see that reprinted. But if you've always wanted to read Micronauts, I would grab these while they are in stock, because Marvel is probably not going to get the chance to reprint these again. And other publishers would have trouble reprinting them, because unlike Transformers, where there's like a random like Spider-Man thing pops up, I think at some point, but it's not in the Marvel universe. This is explicitly in the Marvel universe. The pitch for Micronauts is they're tiny. I've not read it, but now I have it all in Epic, so I can. Okay, let's continue to Moon Knight. Of course, some of you tuned in for my epic Moon Knight stream last week, not about Epic Collections, but ranking every Moon Knight cover ever from his modern era, what would be in his modern era epics. And I can say that because his classic line is completed, baby. There's no Moon Knight to collect after what's in volume 8 here until he gets his own series again in 2006. So there's no way there's in volume 9 ever to come. There's no way they would start collecting that 2006 stuff in the classic line. That is a clear break that starts us in the modern line. I've been waiting for this line to finally be complete because I want to sit down and read it all in paperback, even though I have it all in floppies. I'm actually excited to sell this in floppies and just have it collected. So the final book in this, which is number 8, The Resurrection War, comes out this October. I'm so excited because it collects two things that have never been completely collected other than in the Moon Knight omnibuses, which is Moon Knight Volume 3 and Volume 4, his 1998 and 1999 4-issue miniseries. And so they're all going to be in paperback for the first time as well. I love Moon Knight. I cannot wait to sit down and read this cover to cover, end to end. Maybe then I will come back and we'll rank every Moon Knight classic cover. No, probably not, because that stream truly almost killed me, was almost the death of me. But yes, love, love, love Moon Knight. Wicked Solar saying, I love classic Moon Knight. Modern, not hooked yet, since I love modern as well. A good point from Jono. I think the Romer Estate has more of the Marvel Master of Kung Fu Marvel characters than just one. So it's not just Fu Manchu. So I'm not sure any of the classic series could be unpicked to print it without getting the rights. Well, maybe that, I was just looking for Fu Manchu, but maybe that's why they also can't reprint the stuff like those Marvel Comics Present stories. But I don't know. I don't know if that's true. Okay. Let's continue to Morbius. It's Morbin time, baby. Still doesn't sound cool. This is Morbius. It is a collection that we are 2 volumes deep into, which collected all the classic Morbius tales that were collected in his omnibus. What's left to collect? Well, we're still in a classic line, but now we jump to the 1990s. He makes his return after seemingly being healed for several years in the pages of Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, and then in 2 issues of Spider-Man, and then he gets his own pretty long-running series as part of the Midnight Suns line. It is Morbius the Living Vampire, 1992, 1 through 32, and then he's also in a number of Midnight Suns Unlimited issues. It could just stop there, but he actually does have a kind of continuing story that trickles out across a couple of single issues of Blade, of Spider-Man, and so I think that maybe you would keep pushing to include this in that volume as well. It could even go as far as 2007 with Legion of Monsters, Morbius the Living Vampire. That's the last very serious Morbius issue that came out, and even though it's in 2007 and you'd be tempted to put it in a modern book, there's no other modern Morbius material really to start the book with near there, because then he's just in Legion of Monsters, he's in Marvel Zombies, he doesn't get his own series again until 2013 at the beginning of Marvel Now, so that 2007 one-shot issue would just be totally abandoned. I would just use that to be the last issue in this line. So looking at what's in there, this just feels like 2 books and out, because that 32 issues, if you don't pick up a lot of crossover stuff in that, which I don't think you have to, he's not a huge participant in Siege of Darkness or in what's the other one called? I forget the other one, but he's not a huge participant in that. So I really think you just split that in 2 and you tack on some of this other stuff at the end. And then in 4 books, we have everything Morbius all the way through 2007. Next, we have Ms. Marvel, another line that's completed. Why do we know it's completed? Well, this one you could make an argument. So this one collects all of Ms. Marvel. That's Carol Danvers, the original Ms. Marvel's series from 1977, some of which is written by Chris Claremont. It collects all 23 issues, and as legend has it, 2 of the final issues of that, which were written by Claremont at the time, were never released because the series was canceled. Those stories were later put out in Marvel Superheroes, the anthology book, 1990. It was in issues 10 and 11, but we don't really think of this as continuing through 1990 because those stories actually would have happened before Avengers Annual 10, which is where Ms. Marvel loses her powers to Rogue, which was written by Claremont as a repudiation of what Jim Shooter had put her through in Avengers 200. So this definitively is over. It ends with her losing her powers, right? Yes, I would say yes. However, if she was massively popular, like if people actually liked her movies, which were great, but if people actually liked them, you could do a 3rd volume of this, which has her as binary. I think if the Marvels had done really well, as it should have, because it was highly entertaining, Marvel would have went back and done a volume 3 of this, and it would have had like all of her individual issues as binary. It would have had her as binary in Uncanny X-Men. It would have had her with the Starjammers. It would have been slim, but these 2 volumes are slim too, and that would have happened. Maybe one day they'll do it, but I think there's very little incentive to do it other than if she was mega popular, because it just is all going to be double dipping of other books, primarily X X-Men. So there's really no reason you have to do it. But if she was popular enough, you could do it. Superchop asking, how many modern Morbius material is there? Well, there's that 2013 series, which I actually really like. I want to say it's by Zoe Keating. This is at crushingcrisis.com/Morbius, which I believe is Patreon only. So that was 9 issues. And then he has a 2019 series by Vita Ayala, which is only 5 issues, and that's pretty much all of his modern stuff. He really does not appear that much in that period, and he's mostly like a jokey, haha, funny character, and then he's a one-shot in 2021, so like barely enough for one modern volume. Barely enough. Yeah, Captain Marvel I liked mostly because the music cues were good. As a movie, it was kind of boring, but I loved the Marvels. I like a charming movie. I like that it was like a charming Marvel movie, and I don't just say charming as like code word for dead girls. It just was like very pleasant to me in a way that a lot of Marvel movies aren't. It's the reason I like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think it's a very charming Marvel movie. Okay. No Marvel superheroes for Miss Marvel. No, it's in there. Oh, sorry. It's in the second volume. Yeah. I'm just saying, usually when stories were in Marvel Superheroes, the series, they were inventory stories written for earlier and they fit earlier in continuity. So it's weird to say that this continues through 1990 because even though it was released in 1990, the stories fit before Avengers Annual 10. Same as with the Ghost Rider stories and Marvel Superheroes as well. Okay. Richard B. also much preferred the Marvels to Captain Marvel. Okay, let's continue to Namor the Submariner. Now this one, Marvel has not gone completely sequentially, but they have stuck with his Bronze Age 1972 series. They did it in a weird order where they did Volume 1, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, and now going back for Volume 2. I think that's because they knew they were going to do the Omnibus and they just didn't want the Volume 2 to compete directly with the Omnibus. But that will be coming out in January 2007. So we have all the way up to what would be a Volume 6. Now, Volume 6 leaves us with some questions because much like Doctor Doom, the next place that Namor is in after the end of his solo series is Supervillain Team Up. So if you're going to put it in the Doctor Doom line, do you double dip it here, or do you just put Supervillain Team Up out as its own epic collection? You know, as the show's been continuing, I've been starting to agree with myself that it probably should be its own epic collection. But then there's still more Namor to collect. So we would continue to his 1984 Submariner miniseries, and then we would start collecting his 1990 series, which the first third or half of which is by John Byrne. And then actually after the end of that series, he really doesn't do anything. And he's not in a lot of comic books after that. Like, we really just have to get to the end of that series. So I think his classic line just ends in 1995. He's in some Invaders comic books, but they would be under an eventual Invaders line. And his next solo series he gets is a Young Namor series that I think was part of like Marvel's Tsunami or something like that. So this is a very, very clear end. I think just as it took us, 5 volumes to get through this original series and 72 issues, to get through that 60 issues of his 90 series plus the miniseries that comes before that and a few annuals and guest appearances. I suspect that is probably going to take 3 volumes, maybe 4, and then we'll be done. So hopefully Marvel keeps up the yearly release schedule on this. We've had a Namor every year. No, that's a lie. We've had Namor every other year at points, every year at points, almost like every year and a half. So to get those next 3 or 4 volumes might take a little bit of time, but maybe people will love him more now that he is going to be back in the movies. Wicked Solar saying he needs more love. Did I know that Sharon, Miss Marvel, was Fantastic Four member 50 issues? Yes, she was the female Thing. New Mutants, another completed line, and definitively completed at that. It starts with Marvel graphic novel number 4, The New Mutants from 1982. It has all the 1983 series all the way to issue 100, and technically Annual 7 comes after issue 100, famously part of Kings of Pain, and that is in 1991, and we're done. We have 8 volumes, and we're out. It's also completely collected in Omnibus. The next New Mutants that there is New Mutants in 2003, which leads to Academy X. I would actually put that just in an Academy X line, because it's only 13 issues of the New Mutants, and it's clearly establishing all of the cast of Academy X, and that is past the modern Rubicon when it comes to X-Men, so there is no other classic New Mutants to do. This series is amazing from beginning to end. It has a couple of weak spots, bird brain, but actually it's such an interesting way to kind of track these characters through adolescence to I won't say adulthood, but young adulthood. And because X-Force is kind of like them going to college, or at least them being seniors in high school, I'm a huge New Mutants fan. This is actually covered not in its own guide in Crushing Crisis, but on a guide that I call New and Young X-Men that has all of the subsequent classes of X-Men. So it has New Mutants, it has Generation X, it has Academy X. That's all in one guide. A clever notice here from Axel Plate. Seems like Defenders and Namor epics may be alternating one each year. Wiccan needs Academy X. I think we'll get it in Omnibus before we'll get an epic collection. Personally. Okay, Planet of the Apes. One and done, baby. Adventures of the Planet of the Apes #1 through Adventures of the Planet of the Apes #11. And it is, I believe, the slimmest epic collection. It's almost unrecognizable as an epic collection. It's almost as small as my nose contour. It is very, very slim. And that is it. Now, there's more Planet of the Apes that Marvel could collect. They technically have the reprint license from Planet of the Apes. There's tons of Planet of the Apes comic books, especially in the 90s. They just weren't from Marvel. So this was actually by Marvel at the time. And it was, I think, pretty much an adaptation of the film in comic with... It's actually really fun. If you like Planet of the Apes... So it's relive the classic films of Planet of the Apes and Beneath the Planet of the Apes as Marvel's 1970s color comic adaptations are collected in one action-packed volume the size of my nose. So if you enjoy Planet of the Apes, I would actually highly recommend picking that up. But I would really like to see Marvel start collecting all of the other Planet of the Apes. Does New Mutants ever fall off for me, Crisis? During Bird Brain, Louise Simonson just gets too involved in the Bird Brain of it all, but then she kind of saves things after that. And I actually think the early Leafold stuff is really, really fun. Yeah. Isn't there a Tales of the Apes Marvel comic? I don't know. And you know, Planet of the Apes is one of the few things on here that I do not have a guide for at all. So I only know what we have mapped into the omnibus poll, and I was going by that for this. But since there's no Tales of Apes, I don't think it's from Marvel. But in any event, they very deliberately called this one Planet of the Apes Adventures, which seems to indicate if they were to do another Planet of the Apes line, they would just name it something different because they didn't call it like the original years or something like that. So yeah, it is very, very small. That is certainly cool. Wiccan saying, New Mutants is my favorite comic, though. Classic Magic's the best. Same answer that Kid Krisis would give. It's her favorite because of Nick Fury not skipped. His classic line alphabetizes under Sergeant Fury. We will do that in just a moment. Here is Power Man and Iron Fist, which I've been teasing for a while, so let's have a substantial conversation about it. This line, as it stands, is complete. Or is it? So Power Man and Iron Fist... Iron Fist's title is canceled. Power Man's title changes its title to Power Man and Iron Fist, and they go on to adventure together. It lasts pretty long, from issue 50 to 125 for a long time, and it was never collected in color. It was not something that we had Marvel Masterworks of. We only had Essentials, and this epic collection line with 4 volumes collected it all, except for one issue which has ROM in it, which is in the ROM line. All done, right? Well, there is the case of Heroes for Hire 1997. Because that is a Power Man and Iron Fist series. You could just do a one-off Heroes for Hire epic collection, and then the next Heroes for Hire is so deep into the 2000s, you would have to do it as a modern collection. But you could also just make it Power Man and Iron Fist Volume 5. They're in every issue of it together. It's their book. It's a Power Man and Iron Fist book. So it's just a matter of marketing. Whether you call it Heroes for Hire, whether you call it Power Man and Iron Fist, it's been collected previously in 2 different paperbacks. But like if they recollected an epic collection, which I'm sure they sometimes eventually will, because I don't think we're ever going to see any paperbacks that are not epic collections until the point that we get to compendiums. And certainly compendiums, in their rush to do compendiums, they are not going to be starting with Heroes for Hire 1997. But it was in 2 paperbacks previously. Those paperbacks were 312 pages and 360 pages. So together, 672 pages. I think that's a little bit bigger than we've ever seen an epic collection get. The biggest epic collection ever is 528 pages. So we would need 2 epic collections unless Marvel broke some rules, which honestly, I think it would be worth it to break some rules to get it all in one. So this line is almost certainly completed, but not officially completed because they could tack on Here's Fire. Y'all are real twisted about Nick Fury. He's right here. Hold on. Oh no, where is he? The line is called Sergeant Fury, y'all. I'm pretty sure. It's behind another book right now, so I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure it's called Sergeant Fury. Stick with me. Okay. Sweet Christmas. Next, we have the Punisher. And after letting this line linger for a really long time, it seems like Marvel is finally on top of it again, because we are getting a volume 1 in 2027, and we also just got a volume number 8 a little bit earlier this year after a big gap. We'd had only one volume between 2021 and this year, and that was a reprint of an existing volume. So after 2021, we were just frozen like Madonna when it comes to this line. Now, suddenly, there's hope with us getting volume 1 and us also getting, what did I say was coming out that came out in March, volume 8. We actually only need one more gap plug, volume 6, to kind of just get a whole set of them on the shelf and then just be moving forward. The thing is, they left so much material for this volume 6. This line does not include Punisher War Journal, and it does not include Punisher Warzone. It's just Punisher itself, but the convention has been that it includes all of the OGNs. So I assumed it would include the one-shots, the summer specials, the back-to-school specials, the holiday specials, but there's just too much to fit into that volume 6. So I just don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they leave out some of the original graphic novels and they just run them later in 9+. Maybe it's not going to have all of the specials. I just don't know. But that will be what's in volume 6 somehow. Then we get to volume 9+. So there's a lot left to collect, because in volume 9 of Punisher, we have a pretty big crossover, I believe starts there. And we've had it collected in paperback before, but not in Epic Collection. So this is probably going to just be recollecting that Epic Collection. Oh, darn, that is not taking me where I want to go. So let's see. I'm trying to remember the name of that. It's called Suicide Run. So it was collected, I believe, in its own collection at some point. Yeah, Punisher Suicide Run. And it's huge. It starts in issue number 85, which is the next issue that's not collected in Epic, but it's only 344 pages in itself, which means they could add some of the other things coming out around the same time to pad that out from what was originally its paperback. Then we've got to get all the way to Punisher 104. That's the end of that series, but there's another crossover in there, the Countdown crossover. Then Punisher reboots in 1995, and we've never had that collected. I think that will end the classic Punisher collection. I think as soon as his title switches over to Marvel Knights, we're into modern Punisher, but we do have to get through the 1995 stuff, and that will take several volumes to do, because as you can see by how small the text is here, there's a lot of stuff to do. Punisher is including all the one-shots but skipping the minis, so maybe they'll spread them out into Journal and Zone. That is a really great point from Apatral. Okay. I think they'll combine Punisher and Punisher Max for modern epics? No. Why would they? I think, well, no. I see what you're saying. Like, there's the mature Punisher by Ennis that is in continuity, and then he starts doing Max, but no, I think they would be different. Okay. ROM is totally completed. Again, Marvel got this license and they banged through it. They did it in 5 volumes, so they were a little bit on the slim side to recoup them those licensing costs. But ROM was a little seen, little liked toy that kind of had a longer life as a comic book than he ever did in any other format, and he was part of the Marvel universe. He appeared in with X-Men. He appeared, Rogue has a great story in his title. He was in Hulk. He was in Marvel 2-in-1. He was in that issue of Power Man and Iron Fist, and it's all collected here. ROM is actually really good. I mean, he's the Space Knight on Earth. It's highly, highly entertaining. It's much better than a comic of this nature will have any right to be. Now we come to Sergeant Fury, because I do believe that is the name of this Epic Collection line. And this is not Nick Fury's time in S.H.I.E.L.D. that was also happening in the 1960s. This is Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos, which we seem to have stalled on. I would really like it just for completionist and historical purposes, because we've never actually gotten through this whole series in color. We've only gotten a few masterworks of it as well. And so we've only got to issue 36 so far, and we've got to get all the way to the 120s of this. We got one volume in 2019, one volume in 2023. Doesn't that mean we're due for another one in 2027? I sure hope so. Now, maybe Marvel's looking what DC is doing with DC Finest, that they were able to sell DC Finest War, DC Finest Science Fiction, and maybe Marvel's like, hold on, this could work. And so maybe, just maybe, Marvel will like scoot out a couple more of these. the good thing is, because this is its entirely self-contained war continuity, they can really bang in like 20 or more issues per volume. Honestly, I think they went a little too short in those first 2 volumes. Honestly, knowing that they were already restored and they didn't need to like make money extra back on restorations, they should be going over 500 pages each on these. There's no reason to drag their feet. So looking that we need to get through like another, what is that, 90, 80 some issues of this, like I really would like to see them push past the 20 issue barrier, because if we're going to go under 20 issues, it's going to take more than 4 volumes. At least let's stick to 20 issues per volume. We'd still need 4. That is a hard sell, but I really, really want these in Epic. And it would be like, well, the reprints, I believe, I could be mistaken, but I think the reprints start after 120. So that's 121 to 126 are reprints. I believe through 120 are original stories. Yeah. Okay. Next we come to She-Hulk. She-Hulk is a very, very rare, in fact, the rarest in all of these 50 slides, that it is a Marvel Classic Epic line where we don't have the first 2 volumes. We don't have the first volume. They started this in the John Byrne era of She-Hulk, because that's what's really, really popular. The original Savage She-Hulk series from 1980 is kind of viewed as like meh, like it's not really highly regarded. It did get an omnibus, but that's because they wanted to put She-Hulk in omnibus and they kind of like got there in their classic material. They will make their way back for it, I'm sure, but what's really cool is at this point we have all of Sensational She-Hulk collected, and I really don't think there's any other She-Hulk to collect before we go to a modern line, because that last She-Hulk volume 6 collected all the way through Thing and She-Hulk The Long Night, which is in 2002. So the next thing after that would be her 2004 series. That would be a modern series. So we just need volumes 1 and 2. We know exactly what they're going to collect. They're actually going to be relatively slim. I think one way that this can offer a little bit of a competitive advantage over the omnibus is that it could throw in a couple of her side appearances that aren't in the omnibus, which we have seen other Epic collections do, just to give a little bit of a competitive edge over buying the omnibus. But this is really obvious, and I think Marvel's probably just, She-Hulk is seen to be a pretty steady seller in collected edition, so I think they're kind of just waiting for their chance to put this out. We just are getting volume 5 to complete that Sensational She-Hulk run. It's called Interrupted Melody in December, so I think late in 2027 or 2028 we'll kick into these final volumes. I didn't love it, but it's okay, says Lance. I buy just about anything She-Hulk. Okay, next is Silver Surfer, and we're in pretty good shape here, but this is one that for me comes with question marks. So Silver Surfer starts, of course, in Fantastic Four, and this was famous for putting out a volume 1 Epic collection that was all double dips. We'd never had any concept that that could happen until it happened. But then volume 2 would be the first actual Silver Surfer material, which is his 1968 18-issue series. That's been collected in omnibus, and the omnibus was relatively recently reprinted, so I'm sure they're just kind of like holding out for that. Then in the run of Silver Surfer 1987, which has been amazing to get in color because we got it in color here before it had ever been collected in color any other way before. Now we're getting omnibuses to move through it kind of rapidly all of a sudden, but this was really like where it was at. We only need one more volume, which is volume 10, and it's pretty much just going to be the Blood and Thunder crossover, which we've had in paperback already, so it kind of made sense to leave it as the last volume. It will have a few more issues of Silver Surfer that were not part of Blood and Thunder, but Blood and Thunder was a huge crossover between Silver Surfer, Thor, and Warlock in the Infinity Watch, so that's going to take up most of the book, and then there's just a few Silver Surfer issues in there as well. Also, maybe it collects Star Masters. But then we've got everything. We've got everything, and because we've had that 68 material in Marvel Masterworks and Omnibus, and because we've had this Blood and Thunder material, except for a couple of issues, we kind of do have all of Silver Surfer covered through 1999 right now. And the final volume, I keep wanting to say issue. The final volume we have of him right now is volume 14. It's called Sunrise and Shadowfall. It was out at the end of 2023. And it not only completes his 1987 series, but it also collects Galactus the Devourer and a 2-issue miniseries called Silver Surfer Loftier Than Mortals. That was from 1999. So is this done without moving into the modern era? Well, here's the thing. For me, I look at Silver Surfer after 2000 in 2 chunks. There's the chunk that happens before Marvel Now, and then there's the Dan Slott stuff in Marvel Now, and they have very little relationship to each other, and they're kind of divided by his appearances in Annihilation and in Annihilation Conquest and in Annihilators and things like that. So there is material that could be a volume 15 of Silver Surfer, and it actually kind of makes a lot of sense, but I just don't know if it would be modern or not, because the next series is a 2003 series, which most of the lines have switched to modern at that point, but Hawkeye didn't. And then some of the stuff, even though it's in the trade era, has never been collected in trade paperback. He also has a 2007 4-issue series and then a 2008 4-issue miniseries. So that's a perfect epic size. 14 plus 4 plus 4 plus a one-shot. That is 18, 23 issues. It's a perfect chunky epic collection. Would it be a modern epic or classic epic? I don't know, but the contents in that box is obvious, should happen, and contains, weirdly, trade paperback era material that has never been collected before. Speaking of things that's never been collected, I don't think in full before, Cosmic Powers Unlimited. But unlike Fantastic Four Unlimited, Silver Surfer's not actually in every issue of Cosmic Powers Unlimited. In fact, I think he might only be significantly in one issue. So I think they would probably be better collected in either a Thanos line if we ever got one, or maybe a Warlock in the Infinity Watch line. I was hoping they would shoehorn them all into Silver Surfer because I would have been happy to see them all here, but they didn't do it. So unfortunately, it is just not happening. No collection ever anywhere has included that 1978. I don't think it does. Hold on. It should be right behind me. The thing is, I put all of those new Valiant omnibuses I got right in front of Silver Surfer. So he's kind of barricaded in there. Let's see. Freedom. No, Freedom starts with 1982. So nothing is ever collected that 1978. It's highly sought after. I think Marvel will put it out eventually in some deluxe format. They'll get the rights. Ooh. They'll get the rights eventually and put it out in some deluxe format. Okay. Blood and Thunder Epic came out in the Thor. Yeah, I think we've already covered it in Thor because, well, we'll see when we get to the gaps in Thor. Marvel has reprinted the Fireside book before around 1999. It can be done. Here's Thor, by the way. Yeah, Blood and Thunder has already been printed because we've got only 2 gaps in Thor, and one of them's the only gap in the remaining classic material, and it's a gap that makes sense. It's the color collection of the Walt Simonson stuff. They left it for last because it's been collected a lot of other ways because they reprint the omnibus with some amount of frequency. We just need 2 more volumes to get through the Walt Simonson stuff. Then we'll have everything Thor from his debut in Journey into Mystery all the way until the beginning of his 1998 series. We've already collected a volume 25 that has the first year of that series. Thor was part of the Heroes Reborn Pocket Universe in 1996, but he didn't have his own book. He was just in Avengers. So there would be nothing to put in a Thor line there. So his volume 25 skips right from the end of his appearances in his own series in 1996, right to the start of his 1998 series. And we know exactly where this is going to switch to modern because we have Thor Modern Volume 1. It's JMS's, John Michael Straczynski. Is it John? I always forget what his actual first name is. J. Michael Straczynski's series that starts in, 2006 or 2007? So we know exactly what we need to collect. It's all been collected before in paperback and I believe in omnibus. So it's not a shock. It's not going to have anything surprising. It's all available. It's all Marvel Unlimited. And this is another example where I hope that Marvel is just going to complete the kind of pre-1998 portion of this run and then take their sweet time collecting the 2000s if they must. Next, we come to Thunderbolts. And we only have 1 missing volume of Thunderbolts left because maybe thanks to the movie, we've been able to get a little bit of progress on this line. We've had 1 per year, 23, 24, 25, 26, announced for March 2027. We have volume 5, Criminal Intent, which is going to take us up through 2002 and up through issue 63. So we just need a tidy collection of the next 18 issues, and then we will be done because I strongly believe that when New Thunderbolts launches in 2004, that this will break and that will be part of a modern line. Why would you not start a modern line with a book that's called New? Although honestly, in tone, it's not that different from the original Thunderbolts, but it's not like the Baron Zemo team, and so I think that that's like a good reason to start it afresh. So I think we'll get this book in 2028. Case closed, wrapped, done, the end, over. Yeah. And then we'll move on to a modern collection probably. So very cool to have it all in paperback. Now we have it all in omnibus. Turns out Thunderbolts is now one of the most collected Marvel series of any series ever. Super, super cool. My full name is J. Michael Straczynski. All right. Now on to Venom. we only have one missing Venom volume, and I can tell you exactly why it's missing. So Venom has a series of miniseries in the 90s that run for 60 plus issues. And they had been previously collected in like a bunch of random trades. This Epic Collection line is a real gift for Venom fans because it puts them all together in perfect order and they're numbered in order. Whereas the trades kind of, it was really hard to tell like which trade was which or what went in what order, even though they mostly had everything. These are really comprehensive. I really appreciate them. Somebody who obviously really loves Venom sat down and mapped them. What's really interesting is that the first two are, let me think before I speak here. The first two are kind of a lot of his Spider-Man era guest appearances. And then from 3 and on is really his own stuff. So Epic Volume 2, it has Venom Lethal Protector, which is, of course, his like big breakout book. But it doesn't really have his whole sequence of miniseries. That really starts due to the success of Lethal Protector. So we have volume 4, 5, 6, and then volume 7 kind of wraps up all of those 90s series with Venom, the finale, 1997. He's really not in anything too much after that. And then the modern era Epic Collections pick right up in 2003 with Modern Epic Collection volume 1 Shiver. So we know exactly where this ended. So I told you I would say why we haven't had this volume 3 yet. It's because it's going to Maximum Carnage. We've seen Marvel do this in Epic Collection before. They will put the complete crossover, if it's relevant to a whole character, in every book that crossed over into it. We saw it with Executioner's Song. We saw it with Extinction Agenda. We're going to see it in a moment with Blood and Thunder. We're going to see it with Venom. We already saw Maximum Carnage get repeated in the Carnage line, and it's in the Amazing Spider-Man line. It's going to be this book. Because honestly, there's not much else to put in this book other than Venom Funeral Pyre. So it's clearly got Funeral Pyre in it just to put one Venom series in it that's not Maximum Carnage. And then the rest of it is just going to be Maximum Carnage. Okay, and then we'll be done, and we're already into the modern line. So awesome. I have this as continuing through 2010. Why did I say that? Oh, because volume 8 of Venom, which came out in this year, so it's actually, I didn't put it in my guide yet, but volume 8 has some stuff from the 2000s of Venom that even crosses over the beginning of his modern epic line, which is actually a little confusing, but that is why I have this as going through 2010. Okay. Wow. For a while, it seemed like we were really behind, but now we're almost done. So this is the Wolverine epic line, and we're only missing 3 epics, and there's an obvious switch to modern in this line. So the epics we are missing is volume 4, which is kind of the second volume of the Hammett and Silvestri run. I think they've avoided this because there was a paperback of almost this exact material that came out shortly before the epic line started. So it's like not a rush to get back to an epic. Plus then there were omnibuses of it, but it's great material. Actually, some of my favorite Wolverine material is in that book. And then we're missing volumes 10 and 11, which I think we're just missing just because Marvel is kind of hitting that area in omnibus right now. So there was no need to compete. But if you look at Wolverine's release schedule, he's not really a yearly epic in historically. There'll be some years where we'll get multiple, and then he'll go through a little bit of a, no, I guess we've got him yearly recently. Because was there 2026? Yes. So I think we'll probably get one of these in 2027, probably volume 4, because they're probably going to wait for those other 2 to be an omnibus. But then the moderns are going to start from 2003 when his Marvel Knights series starts with Greg Rucka. That makes perfect sense. There's no reason not to do it that way. So just 3 more and we'll have all of them. Now here's one where they really could do a volume 0, because what they didn't do was collect all of the early kind of beloved Wolverine stuff that's part of the run of X-Men. So this epic line starts with Wolverine 1988 #1. So it doesn't have like the Wolverine miniseries from 1982. It doesn't have Wolverine and Spider-Man. So they could be cheeky and put out a Wolverine Epic Collection volume 0. It could even have his Wolverine, well, it wouldn't have his Wolverine prehistory stuff in it, which are all graphic novels, because they're in this run in release order. We're only talking about stuff that was released before 1988, and it would be pretty slim, but if they want to do, and it's Wolverine, they certainly could. But it's all, the point is it's all in the X-Men line. Okay. Oh, that's a good point. Volume 4 would probably have Weapon X from Marvel Comics Presents in it. And so that might be the last one they finally put out. Fun story that I haven't had a chance to tell on air yet. I have now bought 3 copies of the Weapon X omnibus on eBay. And I buy omnibuses on eBay all the time. They have to ship them all the way around the world. Sometimes they get a good price. All 3 of them have been declined to ship to New Zealand. And I couldn't figure out why until I also ordered something that had the word battle in it from Amazon, and it also got declined, to realize the reason it's not shipping to New Zealand is because it has the word weapon on the box. What's funny is that I've ordered other things that are Weapon X to be in New Zealand. This is specific to eBay's international reshipping program. They assume that New Zealand Customs is going to reject it, so they don't even try to ship it. So I've found 3 affordably priced Weapon X omnibuses now. I've bought it 3 times, and all 3 of them got sent back to the sender from eBay's international shipping hub. So I hope that's not a sign for the future that every box I ever order from anybody that has Weapon X material is going to be rejected. But I think it's eBay specific. So I gotta find some, and they were so cheap. I got them at such a good price. So, fun New Zealand story. I can't seem to buy the Weapon X omnibus from New Zealand. New Zealand specifically prohibits it. The funny thing about New Zealand Customs is they will just open your stuff and rifle through it. So if they thought there was a weapon in it, they would just open it and they would see it was a goddamn book. Andy Holcomb pointing out that it wouldn't necessarily have Weapon X because the Wolverine line has skipped the Marvel Comics Presents issues. That is an omnibus only thing. So then maybe they do, yeah, who knows? Maybe they do a volume 0 and it does have everything from the omnibus that fits chronologically before volume 1. Maybe they never do it. Who knows? Who knows? The thing is, eBay, much like FedEx shipping from DCBS and from in-stock trades, eBay global shipping is actually like a pretty good deal. So getting an individual person to send it to me would probably be way, way more expensive. And I don't want to do that, but I have my means of doing it if I have to. Okay. X Factor. This one needs some doing. So clearly it starts with X Factor number 1. It ends with X Factor 149. We'll get to my special note in a minute. We've skipped volumes 5 and 6. Why? Because they had to market the X Factor Volume 3 Omnibus, which is coming out later this year, and that covers the exact same material, so they're just going to make us wait. When we get a next X Factor Epic, I absolutely believe it'll be Volume 11, and they'll continue collecting to the end of that series. It looks like there's only 23 issues to cover there, but then there's a -1, there's Strong Guy Reborn, maybe a Sabretooth one-shot. I think that probably stands the chance of being broken up into 2. I don't think that the X Factor line will follow Havoc into Mutant X. Mutant X had its own 2 complete collections that will eventually get reprinted as Epic collections. However, there is a 4-issue forgotten series from 2002 called X Factor. It doesn't really have mutants in it. It's part of when mutant comic books were really weird, like in the Ecstatics years. And it's almost like X-Files-y, like people investigating a kid who was like turned out to be a mutant. So it doesn't really have any X-Men in it either. In the same way the Excalibur line included the very Excalibur 2001 Excalibur miniseries, it would be kind of fun if this line ended by finally collecting that 2002 miniseries. It has never been anywhere. But yeah, I expect that they're really going to drag their feet on getting out volume 5 and 6 because they're going to want to sell through on that omnibus. So I really think that we're going to get volume 11 first. I mean, I don't know anything. I'm just guessing based on the best of my ability to guess. Later this year, we're going to get what is volume 2, which they're calling the Morlock Massacre. Obviously, material that's been very, very well covered in omnibus in both the X Factor Volume 1 omnibus as well as the Mutant Massacre omnibus. But it's been a while since those have been out, so there's definitely like a cool down period there. Does X Factor deserve to be completed? I don't know. Yeah, I'm into the end run of it right now in the house read, and it is yeah, it's rough. The thing is, the two that you don't... Mutant X is Havoc in a totally other time, and the 2002 miniseries has nothing to do with the X Factor team. It's just called X Factor, so you don't really need to have Mutant X, and nor do I think there would be any reason to put Mutant X in the X Factor collected editions. Yeah. Okay, here we are with X-Force. We're really close on X-Force. There's just 2 because we know where X-Force is going to stop. It's going to stop when X-Force turns into Ecstatics, which happens after Volume 9. So we just need Volume 6, which has the stuff that immediately starts during Onslaught and then immediately follows Onslaught. And then we need Volume 9, which we have had collected before. That's kind of the Counter X Revolution period. And then that ends when Ecstatics begins. So I really think they're going to just knock this out in the next couple of years. There's nothing complicated about it. We've been getting X-Force on a pretty regular clip. We skipped 2024, but otherwise it has been pretty consistently yearly. And actually they did 2 in 2023, including 1 in December to make up for it not being in 2024. They just had a late 2023 release. So I do expect to see one of these in 2027 and then 1 in 2028, and we'll be done. What's interesting is that Volume 6 has the only not ever reprinted X-Force material in it. It's pretty short from issues 57 to 66, so it might have some more stuff from Zero Tolerance in it as well. And now we come to the final line, saving the best for last. I could have put it first, I suppose, is X-Men. Starting with X-Men, technically Uncanny, but not in the indicia, only in our recollection. 1963, number 1. Where is it going to break for modern age? It's going to either break when it transitions to Joe Casey before Chuck Austen or at the end of Joe Casey before Chuck Austen. Because Joe Casey was writing alongside Grant Morrison. We've had new X-Men in Epic Collection. So I really think that 2001 barrier is going to be where everything switches to modern for all of the X-Men team books, which makes a lot of sense. But maybe the Joe Casey stuff, which we've had in paperback already, that runs from 394 to 409, maybe that becomes one last classic book, and then they start fresh with Austen. Both ones of them are sort of ignominious starts to a modern epic collection. So who knows? Or maybe they'll just keep doing a classic collection. I mean, there's no reason they have to switch to modern epic. Maybe they just leave Chuck Austen in the classic numbering. Who knows? But let's talk about what is missing. So, missing from this, we need volume 16, which is the stuff surrounding Inferno, including Inferno. So it's from the beginning of the Genosha arc before Inferno to the issues just after Inferno. I think they were probably holding on this because they knew there was going to be an omnibus to complete for it. Then volume 18, which is the stuff that is directly before and leading up to Muir Island Saga, which we've, of course, had collected in the Claremont Lee Volume 2 book. And then we need to continue collecting from Volume 24 onward. That will not only continue to collect all the way through Age of Apocalypse in perfect reading order of Uncanny X-Men and X-Men, which will be perfectly reflected in the blue and gold omnibus line. But then, honestly, I think they'll probably just keep reprinting past past Age of Apocalypse. They'll do Road to Onslaught in Epic Collection. They'll do Onslaught in Epic Collection. They'll just continue, but they'll just let there be a cooldown on some of these omnibuses. They've just came out in the last couple of years. So I think actually the next one we're going to get will probably be volume 16 because it'll be, no, I guess we don't quite have all of that in omnibus yet. Maybe they do volume 18 next. And then they do volume 16. And then by then we'll have Blue and Gold volume 4. And then they'll do volume 24. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what's really fun is that we got a big flurry of this. It felt like they were like really dragging their feet on X-Men, especially because they purposely broke through that 2021 barrier. And so it just felt like we were really, really taking our time to get them. And then in the past couple of years, it just has been like, bang, a lot of X-Men. So just looking at from 2024 to now, we got volume 23, then we got volume 10, then we got volume 13, then we got volume 11, then we got volume 14, then we got volume 15. So like we have announced for 2027. So we've got a really, really quick run of this in Epic Collections. There you go. All the Epic Collections, all the gaps, everything explained. There will be one more slide, but a few notes before we get there. One, if you've hung out this long, there will be an after show. And if you want to watch the after show and you're watching this live, the link is in the description. If you're watching this later and you just want to hear me rant for another hour based on whatever people ask me, it's a full-on Q&A, the links eventually show up on Crushing Krisis as a Patreon-only benefit. The other thing is I'm not expected to be on any other shows this week, so I won't see you again until next week. However, I did just book an upcoming appearance on Old Reader, New Reader with Maddie, so I will have more news of that as it comes, but that's a couple of weeks away, okay? So here's the final slide. The thing is, I'm going to come back and do this again. Yes, that's both a promise and a threat, because every time we announce new Epic Collections, now that I have this built, instead of the 30 hours it took to build this, in the future, I'm just going to come back, and if volume 18 gets printed, it's just going to have printed, because I'll just update you every time there are new epics announced. So that's awesome. That's why I wanted to spend so much time and care and attention on this, because all the little corrections you guys have offered, all the notes and things, that will be built in the next time I do it. And we might be doing this like 3 times a year. Of course, it'll go faster when we do it in the future because it's all been explained. But every time we get a new slate of epic releases, we are going to do this again. But there are 3 other epic shows I could do. So I want to talk about that for a second, because if you're interested, there are things I could come back and do. I could do this same show for all of the existing modern epic lines, and they're all over the place, everywhere from the early 2000s all the way up to stuff as new as, I think there was a modern epic that had something from like 2023 in it. So that's whole, more than 2 decades worth of stuff. It could be exactly in this format. We talk about gaps, and there's plenty of gaps because those lines are much newer. The other thing we could do is we could talk about all of the missing epic lines, which I would divide between classic missing lines and modern epic lines. The missing modern epic lines is a crazy thing to think about because it's pretty much anything, any Marvel title from 2000 forward. And we're seeing that they're not keeping them as contained in lines because we saw that they did an astonishing X-Men modern epic. So clearly there's not just going to be one big ball of wax X-Men. It's going to be like different lines for different titles. But here's a little tease of what we could talk about if we talked about classics. Now, I don't know that I got everything, but I did go through the entire omnibus poll to look at everything we haven't had in Epic Collection. And this is, I think, 72 titles that could be Epic Collections. Some of them could be wrapped into other epics, but some of them maybe would be several different epics. Like I have Marvel 2099 here. That could be several different Epic Collections. I have Marvel UK here. That could be several. There's one more on here somewhere that could be several. Oh, New Universe could be several. Ultraverse could be several. But there are 72 other ones. So that's why I'm so excited for more of these 50 to get closed. And if I come back and do this again, I'll talk about kind of which ones are open, which ones are closed, like how many have we closed every year, because I really would love to see a couple of these happen. And I think some of these would do better than other. I have Darkhold on there twice, so maybe there's only 71. But I think some of these would do better than others, and some of these are more warranted than others. I think it would be really nice to get a Deathlock line. I think it would be really nice to get an Inhumans line. I think now that Marvel is seeing DC do well with DC Finest events, it would be nice to get an events line. So it would be fun to come back and talk about these a little bit more at length. What if I ranked them? That would be fun. So definitely, if you're watching this later, leave in the comments, which of these epic shows would you want me to epically produce? Do you want to see me do the same show for the modern epics? Do you want me to talk about the missing classic epics, or do you want me to talk about the missing modern epics? So if you've hung in all this time, wow, that's great. Again, all of this stuff is covered in Crushing Crisis, all the text in all those slides. The reason it was so small is because I know you can go into Crushing Crisis right now and see all of that same information. And that I can't ever bring you the density of information in a YouTube video that I have on Crushing Crisis. These two things go together. This is the visual and oral presentation of the intense amount of knowledge that's on Crushing Crisis. So if you have not been, please go. It is my home on the internet. It is about to celebrate its 26th anniversary in what is it? August 26th, on August 26th. So I'm gonna have a special celebration. I've started making plans on the channel. Okay, I will end with my reminder, which is not just visit Crushing Crisis, which is not just love comic books, but y'all, are we respecting people out in this world? Trans rights are human rights. Black lives matter. Stop Asian hate. Immigrants are people just like you and I. I shouldn't have to do all the taglines because we should all just be able to treat people like people. And the thing that I love is that on this channel, I know that we would all treat people like people. But the thing we have to do is we have to go out and make our love and respect for other people so attractive and so common sense that everybody else buys into it. And that's the hard thing. And that's really being a social justice warrior isn't really being a social justice warrior. It's not like a battle and swinging your axe. It's kind of like out there just being a social, it's kind of being out there being a social justice lover. We're a lover, not a fighter, right? You've got to go out there and show that it's just so much easier to love and respect people. And I know that you're all doing that because I just know that's who watches this. And I feel extremely, extremely blessed to be able to have a channel which hundreds of people watch, that, you know, the website with hundreds of thousands of visitors every month, and to know that a lot of those people are people that care about other people. So please go into the world and share that message. And if you're having trouble loving one part of it, I know, man, it can be challenging to think of people that are different than yourselves. I was challenged thinking about trans people before I realized, hey, non-binary is trans and I'm non-binary. Surprise! So like, I get it. Nobody's saying this has to be easy, and nobody's saying that you got to get it right in the first try, but please go into this world with open minds and open hearts. And that's all I can ask. And if I can help you in some way on that journey, I am happy to, because I would want you to help other people on that journey too. So until I see you again, which should be a week from today, if all things go to plan, or in an after party in a minute if you're coming to such a thing, please don't have a crisis. Unless, of course, it's me.